Hey guys. This is part 8 of What If Naruto Realized His Full Potential. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 22, The Missing Sannin. Approximately 1 year later. He'll be here in a matter of weeks, Tsunade-sama. I know. He'll be angry. I know. He's going to want answers. And revenge. I know. What are you going to do? Tsunade massaged her temples as she felt a migraine building up. That I don't know. Nearly a year had gone by. Naruto would be returning soon, and she wouldn't be able to keep the truth from him then. He's going to hate my guts when he finds out, at least for some time. Though Shizen idolized the Godame, she knew Tsunade wouldn't appreciate her sugarcoating the issue. But you did the right thing, Tsunade-sama. The time wasn't right for Naruto-kun to return. He would have done something reckless and maybe even gotten himself killed in the process. He still might, Tsunade sighed. I should be happy the kid is coming back, but honestly I wish he would just stay there for a few more years. Shizen understood where her teacher was coming from perfectly. Hiruzen-sama did say he had improved a lot. He may be able to protect himself now. He'll still be young, and inexperienced, and stupid, Tsunade moaned regretfully. That's not fair, she then immediately acknowledged. No, it's not, Shizen agreed, hugging her clipboard. You'll have to keep a close eye on him when he gets back. Tsunade rested her head and outstretched arms over her desk. I know, Shizen. It can't just be anyone, the assistant added thoughtfully. Do you think Kakashi-san will agree to it? It'll be too obvious if it's just him, Tsunade said as she sat upright. Shizen hesitated for a moment. How about Uchiha Sasuke? She suggested carefully. It was common knowledge the two rivals had a rather heated spar over a year ago, during which they had tried to kill one another with lethal ninjutsu. Maybe. Tsunade considered the suggestion for a moment. Get them in my office. Actually, get Sakura too. At that moment the door opened and Sakura walked in holding a clipboard of her own, as though she had been summoned by her teacher's words. Tsunade-sama, I have the new supply orders from the hospital as you requested. She looked quite different, taller and with more feminine features. She wore simple field medic attire. Just get me the other two, the Godame said to Shizen before turning to her younger student. Sakura, I'm going to need you to do something for me. Of course, Sakura agreed immediately. Mount Konguren. Hiruzen sat cross-legged and enjoyed a smoke as he observed the fight. They had moved to a wide plateau on the mountain where the Sarutobi clan did much of their sparring. The Sandaime had aged significantly over the past year, his hair now completely white and long, due in part to Tsunade's treatment. He had lost all of his excess weight and looked to be in great shape, wearing a loose-fitting tunic and a robe over his shoulders as he watched. That's it, Enma. Go for his left, he's still favoring it after you broke his arm last time. Naruto was in the middle of sparring against the Monkey King and seemed to be holding his own. Whose side are you on, old man? Over the past year he had grown nearly a foot. He had turned 15 years old a few weeks ago. His gravity-defying hair had grown to shoulder length, and his face looked considerably more mature now. Naruto wore a white short-sleeved shirt under a simple blue, sleeveless tunic with the Sarutobi clan insignia that showed off much of his matured physique. He hadn't grown more muscular per se, but rather grown leaner with a much more balanced build. He was both light on his feet and had considerable body strength to go with it. He wouldn't have been able to keep up with Enma if he didn't. You should be more concerned with focusing on your opponent. Enma delivered a crushing palm strike to his chest. Naruto went flying but managed to flip midair and land on his bare feet. Fuck, that hurt. Language, Hiruzen and Enma said simultaneously. Naruto ignored the aching in chest that was sure to be a bruise and charged head-on. Either you're getting old or I'm getting faster. Either way you're on the slow side today, Enma. The Monkey King howled with laughter as they exchanged blows at high speed. Humility certainly isn't your strong suit, is it? Nope. Hiruzen watched them continue to spar with a faint smile. He did it. He completed his training in just under a year. The Sandaime could only wonder how much farther he could go. At times it was as though he were training with the Shodai. They were both so lively, so full with potential. You should be able to give Kakashi a considerable run for his money now, Naruto-kun. Naruto froze, eyes wide with shock. Really? That's awesome, Alf. Enma punished his lack of concentration with a punch to the face. Focus on your opponent at all times. We've been over this. Naruto picked himself off the ground with a pained groan. That was dirty, old man. You did that on purpose, didn't you? The Sandaime feigned not to hear him and chewed on his pipe instead. I fucking knew it. Enma dropped his elbow in the youth's stomach. Language, Ak. Can't breathe. For a moment the Monkey King relented out of concern, only to then realize he had been tricked as Naruto wrapped his legs around his neck and pulled his arm in an attempt to force Enma to submit. Trickster, there's no such thing as a clean fight. I have done the best I could, Tsunade, Hiruzen thought as the two wrestled it out in the dirt. He's your problem now. The Sandaime stood up, dusting himself off, his robe falling of his shoulders. Enma? The Sandaime called as he joined the fray. All right, old friend. The Monkey King jumped into the air and transformed into an adamantine staff as the Sandaime caught him. Naruto grinned enthusiastically. All right, Gramps, try not to break a hip or something. You're going to pay for that one, Hiruzen said dryly as he twirled the staff dexterously. Amigakure. The highest tower of Amigakure was an immense building with 4 humanoid faces facing the cardinal directions. The people called it the Kami no Tu, where they knew their godly protector resided, high in the heavens, amongst the clouds that reigned perpetually. Pain sat on the outstretched tongue of the humanoid facing north. Don't look so displeased, Conan. Aim's angel put little effort in hiding her distaste. I do not understand the need for secrecy and deceit, not like this. How many times must I explain it to you? Pain looked to her, his voice as devoid of emotion as his face. Secrecy and deceit are a necessity. You are a god, Nagato. Conan said the words with absolute confidence. You do not need to stoop to the level of that man and manipulate from the shadows. It is beneath you. You know better than to address me by that name when we are expecting company, Conan. Pain moved inside the tower through a canopy as heavy downpour fell. The paper goddess hung her head. I'm sorry, forget it. Raise your head, Conan, he is here. The Akatsuki leader looked to the door as it opened. Kakuzu. Kakuzu entered the room, nodding respectfully. Conan, the former Takigakure shinobi, acknowledged. Kakuzu, she returned coolly. Takigakure? Pain queried, sat at the head of the table in the room, subservient for now. I may have to incite a coup and replace Kurakami with his number 2. Suiben seems open to assuming control. Kakuzu drew a chair to his one seat away from his immediate left as Conan sat at his right. Use your best judgment, Pain permitted. Kakuzu nodded. Will Madara be joining us? No, Conan spoke up before he could. The god of pain made note to talk to her soon. Madara is off doing his clandestine, nefarious business, though what that is remains unknown to me. So long as he does not meddle with our affairs, let him stay far away, Conan said. Kakuzu chuckled in his baritone voice. You despise him still, far more than I. What has he done to earn your ire? None of your business. That's enough, Conan, Pain rebuked sternly. He preferred it when she was her usual, quiet self. Where is Haiden now? I left him to oversee things in Takigakure for now, Kakuzu answered promptly, adding, I reminded him any misdeeds would displease you greatly. He will not behave too erratically. Where did Sasori find that beast of a man, I wonder? He has his uses. Pain looked to Kakuzu. One of them being that Kakuzu can't kill him. Unfortunately, Kakuzu and Conan said in unison, though it was not their intent, and they ignored it happened. What of the hunt for Orochimaru? I haven't heard from Sasori in a while. Pain swiftly moved on. The snake Sannin had proved to be quite elusive since he had left Akatsuki and taken his ring with him to spite them. We must retrieve the Kuring. Kakuzu considered his next words carefully. Sojan has tried to retrieve information from Jiraiya the Gallant but to no success, he shared a moment later. His mental barriers are quite formidable. We were fortunate to have his number when we took him down. Just now you paused, Pain said almost accusingly. Why, you know they are torturing him still? Kakuzu queried apprehensively. Given your past ties, I thought. You thought wrong, Pain cut him off, his displeasure both evident in his voice and godly eyes. We cut our ties with Jiraiya a lifetime ago. He no longer means anything to us. Isn't that right, Conan? She nodded with hesitation. It is. Pain averted his gaze to Kakuzu. Make sure Sojan understands that my patience is wearing thin. I don't understand the need for that man's involvement, Conan voiced with a look to Pain. You could retrieve whatever information Jiraiya has with a simple touch if you would just. Quiet, Conan. The angel of aim fell silent without another word. Pain set his Rinnegan eyes on Kakuzu. Make him understand. As you wish, Kakuzu nodded once more. I will send word as soon as I leave. Good, Pain said. Now tell me what the fence-sitter has been up to. Mount Kangurin. Naruto followed Hiruzen and Enma up the mountain path towards the Sarutobi stronghold atop the mountain. The stronghold was essentially a small village surrounded by lush, tropical jungle and bodies of water all over. It was a truly unique ecosystem he doubted he could find anywhere else in the world. The Sarutobi lived in modest wooden houses and slept in hammocks and in trees. The weather was always the right temperature, comfortably breezy during the day, delightfully warm in the evening and cool at night. It was like paradise living there. On the way back they greeted several Sarutobi clansmen, humans and apes alike. Naruto had gotten to know most of them to an extent in his time living with them. The apes were more or less the exact same as the humans. There were even a few grannies that occasionally sent him on errands. He even had to look after the kids every now and then, usually on days he was made to relax after arduous training the day before. "You return to Konoha soon," Enma said as they walked past a group of young Sarutobi humans and their monkey counterparts. "How do you feel?" Naruto smiled a little. He hadn't had the time to think about it. "I'm looking forward to seeing my friends again, but I'm not sure if I'm ready. You're welcome to stay for as long as you'd like." "I appreciate that, Enma, but I made a promise." His smile turned into a grin just thinking about it. "Do you think I'm ready, Gramps?" Hiruzen laughed. "That is not a question for me to answer. I figured you'd say that." He had gotten to know Hiruzen a lot better over the past year. As a child he had put him on an obscenely high pedestal, believing there wasn't anyone stronger or wiser than his Jichan, who he perceived to be infallible and would live forever. Naruto knew better now. He knew Hiruzen as more than a surrogate grandfather or as the Sandaime Hokage. He knew him as a man of great responsibilities and experience, and as a man who not only had many accomplishments but also many regrets. Hiruzen had shared many things with him, and taught more than just ninjutsu. He taught him discipline, what it meant to be a leader, decision-making, and so much more. At first it seemed as though every day he learned something life-changing, but after a while Naruto realized that Hiruzen was simply sharing his own experience, lessons he had learned from mistakes he had made a long time ago, hoping he would learn from them. "You have undoubtedly improved," the Sandaime acknowledged after a while. "What I said earlier, I meant it. If you simply continue to hone your skills and sharpen them with experience, you will surpass me in no time." Naruto looked at him through squinted eyes. "You're just saying that, aren't you?" There was simply no way he believed a word he said. It sounded too good to be true, and amongst many other things he had learned, Hiruzen wasn't a saint. The man was a shinobi through and through, and would lie, cheat, and play dirty just to mess with him. "But seriously though, really?" Much to his chagrin, Hiruzen and Enma started laughing and continued on ahead. Kusa no Kuni, Kyuzugakure Black Site 341. In the shinobi world, the value of intelligence cannot be overstated. It the highest valued currency for a shinobi trades in death, and he is blind without it to guide his blade. Regardless of time, location, or the people involved, death always follows. One way or another, as direct or indirect consequence, death shall occur and lives will be lost. It is for that reason shinobi villages put great time, care, and precision in their information networks as they methodically gather and meticulously analyze intelligence from across the world. Kyuzugakure took exceptional care in gathering information. Little was known of the shogun as far as his personal life went, only that he was extremely cautious, a recluse who at times hadn't been seen in public for years after his meteoric rise during the Civil War. Sojan made it his top priority. Kusa knew everything both inside and outside the country. 2 of the 3 great wars had been fought on Kusa soil before the Civil War, and both could have been prevented if they had all the facts, if they knew what their enemies were thinking, what they were planning. Sojan would never allow war to befall his beloved country ever again, no matter what the cost. The Hidden Grass leader was known for his cutthroat methods with reason. No line was too blurry to be crossed, and no price was too high so long as Kusa was safe. With that thought in mind, Sojan had left Kyuzugakure to visit one of many black sites near the Aim no Kuni border. The black site was an underground base in the countryside, far removed from prying eyes. The shogun traveled without envoy, both out of lack of trust and necessity. He wasted no time to enter the hidden base. Normally there were 5 shinobi assigned to every black site, 4 guards and 1 interrogator, who was usually the site's supervisor. This particular base had 12 personnel and an ANBU squad stationed nearby to provide backup. Torches flickered as the heavy doors opened. There was no electricity used in this particular black site to avoid suspicion. The site supervisor waited by the entrance and bowed respectfully. "Sojan-sama, how is your houseguest?" The Hidden Grass leader wasted no time. "Bring me to him." "This way, sir." Sojan followed the supervisor down a labyrinth with many turns and eventually wound up before a heavy steel door covered with few ninjutsu markings. A minute later they were in an observation room with one-way mirrors connected to the interrogation room. There were 2 men in the room, one dressed in the same black attire as the interrogator, and the other was their houseguest. I was in the middle of interrogation when you entered, sir. Habara is covering for me. Have you made any progress? Sojan queried as he looked to the interrogation room, his eyes on the house guest. Jiraiya the gallant had seen better days, much better days. He hung half-collapsed to the ground by the arms, his bare chest covered in scars and burn marks. He had lost a tremendous amount of weight and appeared malnourished and dehydrated. His eyes were vacant and devoid of any life. It was as though he simply was not there, as though he could not even feel the whiplashes his interrogator was subjecting him to. A large fuin covered the floor beneath his feet, the walls and ceiling. Every inch surface was covered in ceiling arrays. No, sir, Kay reported dutifully. We have been unable to break him. As I wrote in my most recent report, the subject appears to be able to perfectly shut out pain. Mind probes are equally ineffective due to pre-set-up barriers. They are quite formidable, sir, unlike anything I have ever seen. You say physical punishment does not affect him? Sojan spared the supervisor a glance before turning back to the one-way mirror. Then why is your junior interrogator whipping him? Kay swallowed, hesitating. Revenge, sir. Revenge? Like I said, the subject's mental barriers are truly formidable. Habara tried to probe his mind a week ago, and was nearly taken over. We found him trying to hang himself. I should like to speak to your house guest. Sojan glided toward the door to the interrogation room and entered. The shogun's presence immediately alarmed Habara. Sojan-sama. The junior interrogator bowed low. I did not know you were coming. Sojan ignored him and looked to Jiraiya, whose eyes became focused upon seeing him. It's been a long time, Jiraiya Dano. Jiraiya spat blood on the floor. Show some respect, filth. Habara whipped the Sannin once to seemingly no effect. You are in the presence of silence. Jiraiya's mouth twitched into something resembling a smile. He was missing a few teeth along with some fingernails and patches of hair. Finally worked up the courage to see me, did you? His voice sounded different, dry and raspy. Sojan looked to Habara. Get him some water. Yes, sir. Habara left the room in a hurry. The Kusa leader looked to Kay with a look that only hinted at his disapproval before focusing on the sage. I don't catch your meaning. Jiraiya didn't elaborate, and the room fell into silence until Habara returned. Slowly, Kay instructed as the junior interrogator forced a bottle in Jiraiya's mouth and tipped it. Jiraiya didn't think to resist and drank the entire bottle, greedily gulping giant mouthfuls before his sadistic tormentor could deny him. I hear you've made things quite difficult, Sojan said conversationally. Mental barriers and such. Must be quite intricate fuinjutsu. You would know. Sojan decided to humor him. Would I now? This was obviously your hand. Jiraiya spoke slowly but clearly, a touch of knowing amusement in his voice. Although certainly not of your own creation. Oh? Do tell, Sojan invited calmly as Kay fetched him a chair. Jiraiya looked around the interrogation room. I've been here for what, a year now? I've been examining these seals for a long time, but I couldn't even come close to understanding them. He laughed a little strangely enough. That's when it hit me. I've seen similar designs like this before. I doubt that very much, Sojan replied as he sat down. Jiraiya smiled knowingly at him. No. I've seen these ceiling arrays before. The castle exploded, scattering chunks of debris in the air. He blurred into motion, successfully evading 4 masked specters. They were out in the open now. He wouldn't have to fight alone. He bit his thumb and performed the necessary hand seals before placing his bleeding hand on the snowy surface. Kuchios no Jutsu. The moment he pushed his chakra through his fingertips and a seal appeared followed by the arrival of his familiar, he felt it. The summoning seal suddenly changed, covered in a series of spirals, and remained etched on the cold earth. These fuinjutsu aren't of your design, and the seal you used to block my summoning wasn't either, was it? His host's silence confirmed his suspicions and his smile grew wider. You stole these seals from the Uzumaki clan, Habara backhanded the sage. Know your place. Blood bubbled in the corners of his mouth as Jiraiya started to laugh. You look uneasy, Sojan. What, you think we didn't know the surviving Uzumaki had scattered after the fall of Yuzu-no-Kuni? Oh, we knew, Jiraiya spat some more blood. So, what did you do with the ones in Kusa? Did you butcher them before or after you stole their jutsu? For just a second it appeared as though Sojan's one visible eye narrowed, but the anger disappeared just as quickly as it appeared and the village leader changed the subject. I have some questions for you that I'd like you to answer truthfully, and I'd like a cold one and a woman right about now, but you don't hear me complaining. Perhaps we can work out a compromise, Sojan proposed, much to the shock of his subordinates. I need to track down your former associate. Orochimaru has proven to be quite elusive. Good luck with that. Jiraiya openly laughed at him. He briefly wondered if the snake had made good on his threat to kill Kakuzi yet. A man could dream. I'd like your help seeing as you know Orochimaru better than anyone, which is why I know you'll never find him. And even if I did know where to find the slimy fuck, I sure as fuck wouldn't tell you. Jiraiya brushed the lengthy hair out of his face with what little movement he had available to him. You can keep looking, but you'll never find him before it's too late. Perhaps not, Sojan admitted airily. But I will find your protege. Uzumaki Naruto is his name, I believe. Perhaps I'll put my talent in butchering Uzumaki to good use? Jiraiya narrowed his eyes in a hateful glare for a moment, and then suddenly burst out in genuine, hearty laughter. That was good. I needed that. You won't be so amused when I deliver him to you after the Akatsuki have ripped the Kyubi from him, the hidden grass leader said in a quiet, icy tone. Perhaps he'll still be alive. The Uzumaki have such incredible vitality after all. What do you think, Jiraiya Dano? Could he withstand the pain you went through? Jiraiya finished chuckling, thoroughly pleased he was able to get under Sojan's skin. In his sleep, he said, sounding as smug and confident as possible. The kid has twice my talent. If you pissants couldn't make me talk after a year, then you're not going to get a peep out of him. But do me a favor, Sojan, and try to go after him. I'd prefer to rip your throat out myself, but I wouldn't be opposed to my protege doing it for me. We shall see, Sojan said as he rose from chair and nodded towards Habara. And by the way, I appreciate you letting me know you're not just some peon and actually know of Akatsuki's true objective, Jiraiya said to his back, an actual grin of his face. I'd love to know how the other villages would feel about you luring them into a sham alliance under false promises to wage a war against the Great Five. How soon do you think it would take for them to form an alliance or pact of their own and muster an army to destroy you? I'm guessing about a week. Habara went into a mad frenzy as he whipped the sage relentlessly. Nobody talked to the shogun that way. Offending Kusa's guardian was unforgivable. Sojan watched on coldly as his subordinate beat the Sannin, too angry to even utter a word. After 30 or lashes he intervened with a simple, calming word. Enough, Jiraiya groaned, his body gone limp and trembling. Blood gushed from the side of his head, chest, and back. Enough, please. Tell me where I can find Orochimaru, and the pain shall stop. Jiraiya mumbled something inaudible. You, go. Fair, speak up. Habara shouted in his ear. He mumbled again, even quieter. You've had worse than this. Habara shouted as he leant in. I said speak, Yigh. Jiraiya clenched his jaws on the screaming man's neck, clamping down with all his strength as his teeth tore through fat and tendon and ripped into arteries. He tasted the coppery taste of blood gushing into his mouth as he shook his head like a wild animal before releasing him. Blood covered most of his face, neck and torso as he smiled at his captors. I said you're going to suffer before you die. Kay was on him a moment later, raining blows on him as Habara lied dead on the floor, blood flowing from under him, his eyes still wide in terror. Sojan repressed an angry snarl as he left. Konoha Nara clan compound. Shikamaru lied stretched out lazily over the deck in the backyard wearing his comfortable off-duty clothes as he gazed at the clouds yawning. True to his bones as Nara, he enjoyed spending his days off quietly, playing shogi and watching the clouds. Shikamaru! His mother called. He groaned, figuring he was about to get scolded again for lazing around. What? He called back. Don't shout back. I raised you better than that. Get in here, you're the one that's shouting. Shikamaru picked himself off the hardwood with one last longing look to his comfy spot before heading inside. What is it? Nara Yoshino stared him down. Don't scowl at your mother. Sorry, Ino-chan is at the door, his mother informed. You didn't invite her in? Of course I did. She said she's just dropping by on her way to work. Shikamaru yawned, scratching the back of his head. Okay, thanks. Say, when are you going to settle down? That girl you're currently dating, Shiho-chan, was it? She doesn't seem so eager to settle down soon. Your father and I have been talking. Perhaps it's best you. Mother, please, not now. Shikamaru ignored her as he walked down the hall to the door where he found an amused Ino waiting. Don't come crying to me if Choji-kun ends up marrying her. Ignore her, Shikamaru said with an annoyed frown. She's just getting restless with her clock ticking. Ino looked a little less amused now, but excited nonetheless. I've got good news, Shika. What is it? Shikamaru asked, yawning. Don't tell me something I don't want is on sale. You think I'd stop by just for that? Ino said with false indignation. I heard from Sakura your boyfriend is coming back to town soon. What? It's nothing. Shikamaru shouted over his shoulder, before turning to Ino scowling. That's not funny. It is to me, Ino laughed at his expense. Anyway, I thought you'd want to know since you guys were like best friends before he left. Right, thanks, he said dryly, looking over his shoulder once he heard soft sobbing noises. Great, she's crying. Thanks a lot. You're welcome, Enos sang cheerfully as she left. Keep your calendar open. We'll throw a party when he gets back. Shikamaru shook his head as he closed the door and shouted, she was just joking, Ma. The lazy genius made a note to get back Ino, though he had to admit he was somewhat glad she had dropped by. Mount Kangurin. Naruto emerged barefooted from the house wearing a fresh tunic, his hair still wet from the shower and feeling content as he walked across the grass to join Hiruzen. The cool evening breeze felt great on his skin. He found Hiruzen blowing smoke rings under the evening sun. I have something to tell to you, the old man said with his back still turned to him. And what's that? He asked, sitting down next to him. Hiruzen lowered his pipe and exhaled the remaining smoke through his nostrils. He gave the blonde a long look over and sighed. Jiraiya went missing shortly after you left Konoha. Naruto sat stunned for a moment. What? There was a summit between a number of minor shinobi villages. Hiruzen carried on without halt. He had his suspicions the Akatsuki and Orochimaru would both be present, so he infiltrated the meeting to gather information. What are you saying? Naruto felt his heart beating faster, and loud enough the thumping rung in his ears. If he went missing during the summit with Akatsuki and Orochimaru involved, then is he dead? The thought was simply horrifying. We simply do not know yet, Hiruzen said simply. Tsunade has tried to get to the bottom of it, but thus far we've been getting the silent treatment. I don't know if you remember your history lessons, but Ishigekyo used to be a particularly close ally of ours. Now they, too, have fallen silent. Naruto was still trying to wrap his head around the information he had just received. It simply didn't make any sense. How could Jiraiya have been defeated? The more he thought about it, the more unlikely it sounded, but just as he was about to argue with the old man, he realized that he had once thought that of Hiruzen, who was far from invincible. If the god of shinobi were fallible, then surely Jiraiya was too? You're saying Ishigekyo was in on it? We don't know, but it is very likely given their refusal to cooperate with us, Hiruzen answered truthfully. I know it must be hard to comprehend, but you need to understand we are currently in a very tense political climate. I don't give a shit about the climate, old man. He burst out, rising to his feet. He began to pace from one end to the other, trying to make sense of it. Jiraiya's been gone for a year and you kept it from me? He's my godfather. You had no right to keep this from me. Hiruzen remained unimpressed with his outburst. You flatter yourself if you think you could have made a difference, Naruto-kun. The summit was hosted by the leader of Kyubi and attended by some of the world's most dangerous and formidable shinobi. There was nothing you could have done, thus I saw no reason to inform you. He could be dead for all well know. Yes, Hiruzen acknowledged flatly. He could be. Naruto covered his face with hands and groaned. He felt angry, upset, and sick with worry, and yet at the same time he couldn't fault Hiruzen's logic. There was a world of difference between the person he was now and the person he was then. I'm sorry I yelled at you, that's quite alright. Hiruzen chewed on his pipe. For now there is no reason to think Jiraiya is dead. The Toads have contacted us and have reported no change in their contract. So he's alive, Naruto said, relieved. Right. If his name is still on the contract, then he has to be. Hiruzen stroked his beard. There is no way of verifying that for now, Naruto-kun, but it is good to stay optimistic. For now Jiraiya is unofficially considered to be missing in action. What is Tsunade doing to find him? He asked. There's not much she can do at the moment, Hiruzen sighed with a shake of his head. Tsunade and I have kept frequent correspondence over the past year, and the information she shared with me is troubling. What do you mean? Naruto asked as he sat opposite the older shinobi. Are you talking about the other villages? Hiruzen nodded. The past 3 great wars started out much the same. Lack of communication under mounting political pressure, giving rise to various factions grouping together for any numbers of reasons or pretenses. I can feel it in my bones. War is coming. You think it's time I go home? Naruto realized the meaning behind his words. Konoha needs to look strong. They need their Jinchuriki back in the village to bolster their position. The old man had taught him a great deal of history and politics. He understood his role as Konoha's Jinchuriki now more than ever. He wasn't just a jailer to the most powerful Biju. He was a considerable military asset. The situation has to be worse than I thought if Tsunade's name alone can't shake their boots. Maybe once it would have been enough, Hiruzen considered as he drew from his pipe. But Tsunade is long past her prime and the shinobi world has not forgotten the Tsunodo invasion that forced me to retire. You may yet achieve your dreams sooner than you realize, Naruto-kun. Naruto frowned skeptically. The old lady is still a lot stronger than I am. Oh, she'd likely pulverize you, Hiruzen agreed easily as though it were comical. But what I said earlier was no form of flattery. Time and experience will sharpen your skills. If you say so, he decided to humor his surrogate grandfather. He knew he had improved considerably, but the notion of achieving his dreams so soon felt foreign and unrealistic. They'll pick Kakashi-sensei before they pick me. That is a likely possibility, the Sandaime conceded. For now it is important you return to Konoha and remain there. Your presence alone will bolster morale. Naruto's expression fell. I doubt it. He had tried not to give it much thought, but he knew he was still in poor standing with the majority of the village. They still think I'm some kind of demon. If you are the man I know you to be, then you will find a way to change their hearts and minds. Hiruzen spoke with conviction as he looked him in the eye. You have a strange effect on people, Naruto-kun, though you may not even notice it yourself. Listen to me very carefully and know that I mean these words. There will come a time the village will look to you and acknowledge you for the man you were destined to be. Hiruzen grabbed him by the shoulder. The will of fire burns brightly in you. I have known it since the moment I first held you in my arms all those years ago on the day you were born. You will become Hokage one day. I have nothing but faith in you. Naruto couldn't find his voice, not that he would know what to say, as he was simply overwhelmed with emotion. He was barely able to form a coherent thought. All he could think about was the letter he had received the day he was promoted. You're serious? Very much so, Hiruzen affirmed as he got to his feet. You will have to make decisions for the greater good, Naruto-kun. It won't be easy, and there will times where you will hate yourself and feel as though none of it is worth, and sometimes it won't be, but you will have to make them. That is what it means to be Hokage, to take on the burden of responsibility for the lives under your care, to make the tough decisions that protect your country and village. Naruto watched Hiruzen go as he contemplated his words and the weight behind them. Konoha, if there was one thing Tsunade hated most about her position as Hokage that wasn't related to actual shinobi affairs, it was sitting in her office all day. It wasn't the paperwork per se that made it intolerable. She had plenty of experience dealing with paperwork all day as the head of the hospital in her youth, though that didn't require her to stay cooped up in her office all day. Every now and then she would get up and pace around her office to get some exercise in, partly to avoid clots but mostly out of boredom or anxiety. Kakashi, good you're here, she said to seemingly no one in particular. The shinobi in question sat perched on her windowsill. He had gone through some changes himself over the past year. One of them was the fact he was clad in ANBU attire and wore dog mask. You called for me, Tsunade-sama? How's ANBU treating you? The Godame made small talk as he climbed into her office. She knew he was slightly disappointed he hadn't gotten the drop on her. You're going to have to try harder than that, kid. I've had to deal with Jiraiya's perversion my whole life. Well enough, Tsunade-sama, Kakashi said as he took off his ANBU mask, under which he still wore his regular face mask. I'm sorry to report in this late at night. Over the past year the copy ninja had returned to ANBU to work with Rooster. His presence alone in the clandestine branch had improved their performance. There was even talk he would soon be chosen to replace the current ANBU commander Nico, whom he had personally trained years ago. That was mostly conjecture, though Tsunade had considered it. She doubted Kakashi was interested in the job anyway. I spoke with Sasuke earlier, so I'll get straight to it, Tsunade as she took her seat behind her desk. Naruto is coming back soon. Time flies, Kakashi remarked, audibly pleased. I wish it were under the better circumstances, but it'll be good to have him back. The village hasn't quite been the same without him. Too quiet, huh? The Godame surmised jokingly. It'll be good to have him home, but we need to be careful, Jiraiya-sama. Kakashi caught on quickly. You want me to keep an eye on him when he gets back? Tsunade nodded affirmative. That's correct. It'll be too obvious if it's just you though, so I've asked Sakura and Sasuke to assist you. A reunion, Kakashi smiled. The idea pleased him. I've never been a real teacher to any of them, but I believe this time things can be different. My time in ANBU gave me a lot of perspective. I think now is the right time to once again return to retirement. That's good, Kakashi, Tsunade smiled. Are you sure Naruto doesn't know anything yet, Tsunade-sama? The copy ninja asked to be sure. It'll be easier to keep him in the village if he doesn't find out. Hiruzen-sensei hasn't told him anything as far as I know, Tsunade replied, albeit with a light frown. You don't think he would disclose that information at a time like this, do you? Kakashi avoided giving a definitive answer. Hiruzen-sama is very wise. If he has told Naruto, then I'm sure he had his reasons. Well, let's hope he hasn't, Tsunade said. There's no telling what he would do if he found out too soon. Mount Kangurin. Naruto tossed and turned in his sleep that night. He lied on his back, breathing heavily. He had just managed to overcome the great mountain. He was beyond exhaustion. He simply couldn't bring himself to get up. It was too much. I must say I am impressed, Naruto-kun. He managed to look to his side and Hiruzen waiting for him. The Sandaime was accompanied by Enma and wore a severe look on his wrinkled face. Well done, Enma congratulated. Thanks. Naruto hoped he didn't offend the Monkey King by remaining on his back, but he was too damn tired. Give me a minute. I'll be up once I can feel my legs again. They didn't share his amusement. Naruto finally got to his feet, though he had to lean on his knees. Jishin, you've done well in keeping your deadline, Naruto-kun. I am deeply impressed, Hiruzen said as he pat Enma on the shoulder. The Monkey King promptly transformed into an adamantine staff. Now it is time to begin your training. Wait, what? Naruto couldn't believe his ears. You mean now? Hiruzen nodded as he twirled the staff and adopted a stance. There is no time to waste. He woke with a start, gasping for air as he sat up. It was dark out, and the stars littered the sky beautifully like they always did atop the mountain. He hadn't realized he fell asleep where the old man had left him. The Jinchuriki sat up, rubbed his face and ran a hand through his lengthy hair. He had come to a realization. Jiraiya was waiting. He probably had been for a year now. It went against everything Hiruzen had taught him about the greater good. It went against logic itself, for it was so dangerous that he knew, even though he was an optimist through and through, was likely to fail. I have to go. Jiraiya was his godfather. He had been an absent one for the majority of his life, but he was still family. The man was his godfather. It was selfish and foolish of him, he knew that, but even so, despite the irrationality of it all, he had to go. He didn't give it much more thought as he returned to his small hut in the village where he had lived for the past year, and began to pack his things. He was so engrossed in his one-track mindset he simply didn't think about the consequences of his actions. It would simply kill his resolve. His old clothes didn't fit him anymore, so he stuck with his Sarutobi clan tunic and began to attach his equipment, strapping his kunai and shuriken holsters, pouches and scroll bandolier. He put on a simple gray cloak that reached his midriff and fixed his kodachi vertically along his spine. Lastly, his tanto lay on his desk. He bounded and skidded over the hard ground painfully, sporting cuts, bruises and wounds of all kinds of variations. He was so tired. I'm too tired to fight. I can barely move. Enough excuses. Hiruzen angrily stuck his staff into the ground. Do you think you will always face your opponents fresh and ready to fight? The Sandaime actually glared at him. You've done nothing but complain thus far, and I find that extremely disappointing. I just climbed the fucking mountain. Naruto shouted back, far more tired than angry. How the hell am I supposed to fight you of all people? You know you're going to win, coward! Hiruzen bellowed, much to his shock. The Sandaime closed the distance between them in an instant, and sent him flying with a swing of his staff. Naruto lied on his back with his arms sprawled, though Hiruzen did not let up and dropped his knee in his stomach before darting back and spinning his staff. Get up! I can't! Naruto cried pitifully, feeling hopeless and miserable and drooling blood and saliva. I don't have the skill or the training. The training means nothing if you lack conviction. Hiruzen raised his voice again. A blade embedded itself several inches deep next to Naruto's head, causing him to scramble to his feet. What the hell? His protest had died upon recognizing the blade to be his own. It had been in Itachi's hands the last time he saw it. Naruto lowered his hand and shouldered his bag with one last lingering look across the hut. He pushed the curtains aside as he exited and walked down the dirt path he walked up earlier. The Sarutobi clan were deep sleepers. He figured leaving unnoticed would be relatively easy. A little while later he reached a plateau about a quarter-mile from the Sarutobi settlement, and bit his thumb as he performed a string of hand seals and pushed his hand on the ground. Kuchios no Jutsu. The smoke cleared and gave way to Sanzaru, his peregrine falcon familiar. The falcon towered over him, the size of a small house. Naruto-sama. The summon dipped its head graciously. It has been too long. They had last seen each other several months ago. Hey, Sanzaru. He patted the falcon's beak and smoothed his feathers. I need a ride out of here. Does this mean you have met your unreasonable deadline and completed your training? The falcon squawked, amused, only to look at him at amazement when he nodded. That is beyond impressive, Naruto-sama. The Sarutobi are known for their arduous training regimen. Yeah, it wasn't easy, but now it's time for me to go, Naruto replied as he climbed on the falcon's back. I need you to take me to Kyubi, not Konoha? Sanzaru reared his large head confused. The Jinchuriki shook his head. No, not yet. I have something I need to do in Kyubi first. It can't wait. They both turned to two familiar chakra signatures approaching them. Hiruzen and Enma approached with mutual expressions of apprehension. I know what you're about to say, he told them before they had the chance to speak. That I'm being reckless and foolish. Stupid even. That my actions could have farther-reaching consequences than I might be able to appreciate right now. He was fully aware of that already. He knew what the risks were infiltrating another hidden village. I still have to go. I'm not here to stop you, Hiruzen said, much to his surprise. As much as I'd like to, I doubt I could if you're as driven as that look in your eye tells me. Naruto swallowed hard. Then why are you here? I know you sure as hell don't approve of this. You are correct, I do not approve, Hiruzen acknowledged, reaching into his robe. But my time is nearly up, Naruto-kun. For 40 years I have had to make decisions in matters of life and death. By now you should know I'm not as infallible as you once thought. I have made mistakes. Perhaps letting you go without trying to stop you is one of them. Maybe I haven't changed much at all, Naruto said quietly. He felt ashamed, more so than he ever had been, and yet it wasn't enough. Why couldn't he just listen? The smart thing to do would be to stay or go straight to Konoha. But it wouldn't be the right thing, he thought. I'll bring Jiraiya back, Gramps. I promise. Before your time's up, you'll have your goodbye. Hiruzen smiled at him in the same grandfatherly he'd done since he was a child. It was a stark contrast to his grim and stern persona as the Sandaime, the professor who had drilled the shinobi arts into his mind and body over the past year. I came here to give you this. Hiruzen withdrew the tanto from his sleeve and closed the distance between them. Naruto looked at the sheathed blade. There was a reason he had chosen to leave it behind. Gramps, take it, the old man insisted, pressing it in his hand. You know what it truly symbolizes now. Carry it with you to remind yourself what you are fighting for. Naruto clutched the sheath tightly and nodded. Thank you for everything, Hiruzen Jishin. Go, Hiruzen said, smiling encouragingly albeit sadly. Take good care of him, young falcon, Enma said to Sanzaru. The falcon dipped its head even lower in the presence of the Monkey King. And take good care of yourself, Naruto-kun. You will always have a family here. Remember that, and come by any time you'd like. Naruto didn't have it in him to say the words of gratitude he wished to convey. They were letting him go despite everything, despite the danger, the risks, and the recklessness of it all. They had taken him in as one of their own and taught him everything he knew, and now they trusted him, in his ability to make the right decision even though they had vastly more experience and knowledge. In the end there were only 2 words he could say before he took off. Thank you. He didn't look back. Konoha. Tsunade was still up working late into the night, a frown of concentration on her face as she caught up on paperwork. She had wasted a lot of time procrastinating during the day. Normally she would catch up the day after, but the documents in her hands were particularly pressing. She took off her reading glasses and pinched the bridge as she leant back in her chair for a moment. Sure, she trailed off, realizing she had sent the assistant home several hours ago. Poof! A lesser shinobi would have jumped at the sudden appearance of the Monkey King. Enma? Tsunade asked, surprised. Dozens of possible scenarios played out in the back of her mind, but deep down she already knew. Enma looked at her gravely. He knows. Tsunade snapped the pair of glasses. Shit. Chapter 23, Combat Ready. 3 weeks later, Konoha, hidden underground facilities. Tsunade stood facing a wall of monitors in the encrypted communications facility located directly beneath the Hokage Tower. The only sources of light were the monitors and the ceiling light positioned right above her. Though she stood by her own, there was undoubtedly a tension in the room. You mean to tell us you have no means of stopping him? The stern voice of the Minister of the Right echoed through the room. That is correct, Tsunade answered. Though it has been 3 weeks since you found out where your Jinchuriki was headed, Uzumaki Naruto has proven himself difficult to track down, Yudaijin Dano, Tsunade answered neutrally. Though unlikely, it is possible he has successfully broken past Kyubi's stringent security measures and infiltrated the village, but we presently have no means of verifying that. This is preposterous, said the Minister of the Left. You are the Hokage. The Jinchuriki is your responsibility. How can you have let this happen? Undoubtedly this aggression will be seen as a declaration of war. The blame lies with me, Tsunade acknowledged without thought for covering her own hide. At the end of the day she was a shinobi first and foremost, not a politician. She had no interest in playing the blame game when that could potentially cost the lives of her subordinates. The consequences will be what they will be, but now is not the time for infighting. What are you doing to prepare us for the worst, Tsunade Dano? The daimyo spoke from the largest monitor in the wall, hiding behind his ornate golden fan. Your lordship, I have sent orders to recall all foreign diplomats in or near territories allied with Kusa no Kuni. The entire shinobi force has been put on alert for combat readiness. As we speak, all preparatory procedures and protocols are taking effect, she reported dutifully as she held his gaze. We are reaching out to our allies just in case while we attempt to establish diplomacy with Kyuzugaku before anything happens. We're not looking for war, but, respectfully, Daimyo-sama, I will make damn sure that we're ready if it comes to that. Very well, Hokage Dano. Daimyo-sama, surely that is not all? The minister of the left outraged. Her assurances mean nothing in the big scheme of things. This country cannot afford a war at this time. The Fire Lord was unimpressed with the minister's outburst, and turned his head in the monitor, an impassive look in his eyes. If you have any suggestions, my dear minister, my ears are open. Unable to come up with an answer, the minister of the left turned to his right. Minister of the right, as the executive of all military branches, I believe this is your area of expertise. I submit to your superior knowledge. Thank you, Saijin Dano. The minister of the right nodded. He turned his stern countenance in front of him towards Tsunade. War is absolutely out of the question. Though our army stands strong and our navy is powerful, our shinobi force remains significantly weakened with the loss of the Sandame, and the many lives lost in the invasion not so long ago. We had hoped your reputation would inspire fear in our enemies, but it appears it is not so, Hokage Dano. Tsunade bit back a scathing remark. He wasn't insulting her to be petty. He was merely giving his assessment of the situation as a professional. What do you propose, Yudaijin Dano? Cut all ties with Uzumaki Naruto effective immediately, the minister of the right stated without hesitation. Disavow all knowledge, involvement in and support for his actions. Declare him a rogue shinobi and enemy of Hai no Kuni. Let the world know we do not support nor condone his actions and that a bounty shall be paid for his head. Tsunade's eyes widened. A fine idea, Yudaijin Dano. That is not going to happen. Do you value the life one shinobi over that of potentially millions, Hokage Dano? The minister of the right demanded with a disapproving look. Regardless of your personal attachment to the Jinchuriki, we cannot claim responsibility for his actions. We must sever all ties for the greater good, and we must do so convincingly. You say you don't want us to look weak, but do you really think losing our only Jinchuriki will make us appear stronger? Tsunade firmly shook her head. She wasn't even going to consider it, not even for a second. And must I remind you who his father is? It would be a disgrace to the Yandame's legacy to make a sacrificial lamb of his only son. The Yandame would not put his son above the country. Gentlemen, let me make this perfectly clear, the Godame said in an as composed manner as she could muster. Uzumaki Naruto will not be disavowed. Under no circumstances will we abandon him. You think yourself irreplaceable, do you, Hokage Dano? The minister of the left challenged, his plump cheeks shaking with rage. If you will not do as you are told, then perhaps it is time we find a new Hokage. One that can still strike fear into the hearts and minds of our enemies. Now, the daimyo chimed in airily. There will be no talk of replacements. Tsunade Dano has done fine work as Hokage. I trust her judgment. Tsunade bowed her head. You honor me beyond deserving, your lordship. The Yandame's son will not be renounced. The Fire Lord paused and glanced at his ministers. For now. I trust Tsunade Dano will resolve this issue in a timely fashion. Did you say the Yandame's son? I didn't know he had a son. A new voice said enthusiastically in the background. Tsunade tensed for a moment. Who the hell was listening in on their conversation? The daimyo looked troubled. Your lordship? A regal-looking young man with silky black hair and fair complexion leant over the daimyo's shoulder directly into the camera. Father, is that the Godame? She's quite beautiful. My eldest, Ryukin, the lord of the land of fire, introduced tiredly. I suppose this is where we conclude our meeting. Wait, what? I want to hear more about the Yandame. The Fire Lord's son said petulantly. I didn't even know he had a son. I bid you good day, ministers, Hokage. The daimyo's monitor went blank. This isn't over, Hokage Dano, the minister of the left promised. The minister of the right agreed with his counterpart. You will hear from us. Tsunade held her tongue as their monitors turned blank. If it wasn't for the fact the monitors were costly, she would have destroyed them. Kyuzugaku, a hooded figure, moved through the bustling streets of the hidden grass village, wearing a poncho reaching his midriff to obscure his identity. It was raining heavily and the masses rushed through the streets to find shelter. The figure passed a pair of Kyuzugaku shinobi who, judging from the pieces of cloth attached to their waists, were part of the village patrol unit, the Kyubi equivalent of military police. Neither shinobi recognized the hooded figure. Their suspicions peaked when he turned from them and sped up his pace. "Hey you, village patrol! Stop!" The hooded figure continued to ghost through the crowds of scurrying villagers and shinobi alike, and reached into his poncho as he disappeared into a dark alley. The Kusanin gave chase and ran into the alley. There was no one to be seen. It was as though the hooded figure had simply vanished from the face of the earth. "Ribbit!" They turned with tense fighting stances to see an orange and blue toad hop past them. "What are you getting so jumpy for?" "It's just a toad." "Shut up, you jumped too." "Only because you did and I thought you saw something." The Kusanin continued to argue as they left the alley. As they left, the hooded figure emerged from the toad's mouth. Naruto threw back his hood, a distasteful grimace on his face. "The smell is going to take getting used to, buddy." He stooped and picked up the toad and placed it in his poncho, patting the small bulge. "Thanks for the help though." It had been nearly 2 weeks since he managed to infiltrate Kyubi. It hadn't been easy. He had spent the first week simply observing the village from the outside under several disguises whenever he could. The security was no joke. All civilians carried papers at all times and all visitors, with the exception of licensed merchants and other visitors, were denied entry. It would have been impossible for him to get in without the help of the toads. "If you're serious about infiltrating Kyubi of all places, you're as reckless as you are stupid, kid," Gamabunta had told him when he had explained his intentions. "But if you're going in anyway, then you might as well use Jiraiya's infiltration toads." Jiraiya's Gamagakure jutsu proved to be dead useful, all right. The hiding in a toad technique made it possible for him to not only infiltrate the tightly secured village but also hide at a moment's notice. It also provided him with a place to sleep, though the stench was far from pleasant. No offense. He patted the toad under his poncho again and went about his way, fixing his hood as he left the alley. Konoha. The third floor of the Hokage Tower consisted entirely out of one large conference room at rare occasions such as times of crisis. It was such a time now word had spread that the entire shinobi force was to be at combat readiness at all times without exception. Shizen stood on an elevated plateau designated for the Hokage and her top shinobi as she tried to call for order whilst Tsunade finished up business. "Everyone, calm down. All will be explained soon." The floor was packaged far past capacity with dozens and dozens of shinobi eager to hear from their Hokage why the village was preparing as though war was imminent. "Where is Hokage-sama? We want answers. Are we going to war?" "No way, idiot. Who the hell would we go to war with? Were you not alive 2 years ago?" Tumultuous arguments broke out all over the floor as all kinds of theories began to float around. Tensions were rising and a riot certainly wasn't out of the question by the look of it. Shizen looked quite distressed as she tried to call for order and quiet. Naro Shikaku sat cross-legged on a cushion behind the Godame's assistant next to several other high-ranking shinobi. The Nara clan shifted his weight as though he were about to stand and address the men himself. "That is not your duty, Shikaku-san," Kohara said. "You will only make the Hokage look weak if you do her job for her," Hamura agreed. "We can't have that, not now." Shikaku didn't believe their intentions but knew they spoke and so sat back down nonetheless. Sakura watched Shizen eventually give up and disappear from sight, probably looking for the Godame who, by her report earlier, was in a meeting with the daimyo and his top-ranking ministers. What is going on? She could only speculate but decided against it. They would all know soon enough. "Sakura." The rosette in question turned to find Ino heading her way, dragging along Choji and Shikamaru by their arms and followed by the members of Team 8. Like everyone else on the third floor, they were in full Konoha shinobi attire. They had all grown considerably over the past year. "You guys, what are you doing here?" "Damn it, Ino, I'm supposed to stay with my platoon." Shikamaru frowned at the Yamanaka heiress as he shook her off. "This isn't a social gathering. Stop getting excited like a kid." "Oh, shut up, Shika." Ino stuck her tongue out at her childhood friend. "How long has it been since all of us have been together?" 4 months and 23 days, Shino droned monotonously. "Though not all of us are here. Sasuke-kun refused to come," Ino lamented theatrically. "Unlike Choji, he takes his job as part of the military police seriously." "You dragged me here," the Akimichi said, annoyed. "And it was my lunch break. You're always eating, what does it matter?" Kiba fell in with a sneer at the Akimichi. "Quiet," Sakura called as the arguments died down. Tsunade stood on the stage wearing her Hokage robe. "I have called this meeting to inform you all as to why the shinobi force has been set to combat readiness." "Are we going to war, Hokage-sama?" Further argument threatened to resume but Tsunade wouldn't let it. "I will not allow any interruptions. Whatever questions you may have, save them for later. The Godame cleared her throat. There were few brave, or foolish, enough to continue whispering amongst themselves, but she ignored them. Most of you, by now, have become aware of the changing political climate. Tensions are rising in, and it may very well be true war looms on the horizon. I knew it! We're going to war! Silence! Tsunade commanded loudly, her chakra momentarily spiking to remind them whom they were interrupting. It was perhaps a tad excessive, but she would not allow her own subordinates to openly defy her. Moments ago I spoke to Daimyo-sama and his ministers, she continued in a calm, collected tone. War is not an outcome we seek, though it may not be up to us. The politicians will play their game of politics to see where the road leads us. But in the meantime we shinobi must prepare ourselves should the need arise that we must fight for country and village. Tsunade could see the looks of uncertainty and apprehension clearly in the eyes of the young, those who had not served in war. The older, more experienced shinobi retained calm expressions as though they were receiving their usual briefing. She prayed it would not come to war. Not again. She didn't know if she could handle the bloodshed, the pain, the suffering, and the lost countless lives. But she needed to be strong. Tsunade knew they would look to her for leadership and guidance. It was her duty as Hokage to lead by example and to inspire those under her charge, and so she banished any and all thought of anxiety and fear and focused on the task at hand. Pray that it does not come to war, and if it does, pray for the strength needed to keep your loved ones safe. She glanced to her advisors and top shinobi with a searching look. It appeared none of them wished to speak, so she sat down on the cushion in front of them and nodded to her shinobi. If you have any questions, we will answer what we can for now. Countless hands raised and shouting began as many rushed to learn the answers to their questions. Yes, you, Tsunade looked to one of the shinobi nearby. State your name and question. Mibu Shinobu, Hokage-sama. Will missions continue as normal under combat readiness? For the time being we are recalling our shinobi and are limiting all missions to within our own borders, Tsunade answered before pointing to another. Most questions were along the same vein. Some even came up twice, but for the most part, it seemed as though they were all otherwise remaining calm. That was until she pointed to a shinobi in the front. You there, you have a question? Sarigaku Tsuzumi, Hokage-sama. The Chunin was noticeably embarrassed, probably due in part the Hokage hadn't recognized him. Ah yes, team leader of 312 of the Niji Shotai, Tsunade recalled a moment later much to his apparent relief. Your question? Hokage-sama, what has caused the sudden shift in tension? For the past year we've experienced some noticeable changes, but the combat readiness doctrine, that is classified, Sarigaku-san. Tsunade cut him off once she realized where he was going with his question. Next, Hokage-sama, Koharu spoke up suddenly from behind her. In light of the severity of this situation, I believe they deserve a degree of transparency. Tsunade glared at the older woman over her shoulder, ever a thorn in her side. Oh, I concur, Hamura agreed predictably. Of course you do, Tsunade fumed silently, refusing to let it show their interference bothered her. Very well, she conceded as she stood up once again to address the entire floor. 3 weeks ago one of our shinobi, Uzumaki Naruto, was scheduled to return to the village. He did not. Instead, he headed for Kusugakure, our staunchest opposition as of late. There is a distinct possibility that conflict will be inevitable. The outrage was predictable, and equally deafening. Tsunade could hardly make out what they were shouting save for a few. You mean to tell us we're risking going to war because of that fool? What does distinct possibility even mean? Give us straight answers. As this went on, Naruto's peers looked one another with mutual expressions of shock and disbelief. Okay, what the hell? Ino looked across the group. He isn't even home yet, and he's already kicking up a storm? He must have had a good reason, Shikamura said seriously. Naruto is not an idiot, and he sure as hell wouldn't put us all at risk over nothing. He's a fool. The group turned and looked to Sasuke as he joined them. He wore the traditional Konoha shinobi garb, indicating his rank as Chunin, as well as the black military police cloth tied around his bicep. He had grown considerably taller and more handsome over the years. Sasuke-kun, Ino hugged his arm to her chest. I thought you didn't want to stand with us. I came here in case I had to restrain her, Sasuke said, looking to Sakura, whose eyes were set in death glare aimed towards a group of shinobi bad-mouthing their former teammate. I told you they shouldn't have let him become a shinobi. They should have just drowned him at birth and saved us all the trouble. Don't you think that's a little harsh? I heard he helped us out a lot during the invasion, even beat the Ichibi. I thought that was Uchiha Sasuke. I guess it takes a demon to defeat a demon, huh? Sakura began to approach them without thinking, her fists clenched tightly, with every intention of pulverizing them on her mind. The shinobi noticed her intent and looked at her suspiciously. You got a problem with what we're saying, little girl? Don't get cocky just because you're the old lady's pity project. Sasuke grabbed Sakura by the arm before things could escalate and began to pull her back. It's nothing. Let me go, Sasuke-kun. Sakura tried to shake him off as nonviolently as she could. They need to be taught a lesson. What good will fighting them do? Sasuke released her as they rejoined the group. Sakura actually glared at him. Doesn't it bother you, the way they talk about him? I know you care about him too, even if you did try to kill him the last time you saw him. Her words clearly stung. Sakura, Ino said angrily. Of course it bothers me, Sasuke said quietly. He felt the same way as the Rosette, though perhaps not entirely for the same reasons. But that doesn't change anything. You're the Godame's student and I'm with the military police. We can't go around attacking people for bad-mouthing Naruto. The two of you changed, Kiba said with clear disapproval. If anyone talked shit about my team, I'd lay them out, no questions asked. Lack of forethought and mindless violence is common with your kin, Inuzuka. Sasuke spat, his patent Uchiha sneer on his face. You want to go, asshole? Kiba challenged, aggressively stepping forward. Quiet, Shikamaru called as Tsunade once again regained control of the crowd. It was troubling, he thought, how much of her support was dwindling. There used to be a time no one dared to speak out of turn against her. That's quite enough theorizing. The Godame shouted over them. This information was meant to stay classified until we knew all the facts, but I have no choice to reveal the reason behind Uzumaki Naruto's actions. Tsunade-sama, no! Koharu hissed at her. You opened this can of worms trying to make me look weak, you old bitch. Now let me clean it up, she replied at a lower register before continuing to address her men. The situation was far from favorable, and she had undoubtedly made a blunder by allowing Koharu and Hamura to attend, but not all was lost. There was an opportunity to raise support, and she took it. Approximately 1 year ago, Kyusugakure called a secret summit, inviting a number of villages with significant military strength. There was talk of Akatsuki attending. In order to determine why, Jiraiya went to investigate. He has since gone missing, and though his status is currently unknown, we know for certain Kyusugakure was involved in his disappearance. We suspect Uzumaki Naruto went to Kusa to retrieve Jiraiya. A long, intense silence reigned, like the quiet before a storm, and ended then just as abruptly. At first, Tsunade feared her on-the-fly plan had failed, that their outrage would reach unprecedented levels and that she had potentially lost all of her support, and then, much to her relief, a loud wave of support flowed through the floor. The Niji Shotai stands proudly behind its own. Kiza Enro bellowed in an uncharacteristically loud voice for the otherwise laid-back platoon leader. If those Kyusugakure bastards want to fight, they've got one. Similar sentiments followed shortly just as loudly, some even louder. Tsunade thanked her lucky stars and hid a sigh of relief. It wasn't unanimous, but the general sentiment was most definitely positive. Playing the us versus them card would have left a bad taste in her mouth under usual circumstances. But beggars couldn't be choosers, and she had to deal with Koharu and Hamura's interference before she lost their support. The two advisors had been a pain in her ass for a while now, but she hadn't expected them to break the facade of unity and openly try to sabotage her like that. There wasn't a doubt on her mind that Danzo was involved. The old crones would get there soon, but she knew when to pick her battles, and decided to repay their betrayal when the time was right. The barbecue restaurant was roaring with debate and laughter in the background as 8 of the rookie 9 sat in their booth. Blue flames stoked the grill and the aroma of vegetables wafted from the broth on the stove. I can't believe we're going to war, Ino bemoaned, stretched on the table mere inches away from the low-burning fires, her hand clutching a large mug of beer. Though they were technically too young to be served alcohol, shinobi were allowed to drink from 16. The waiters had been too busy to even think of asking for their IDs. Thus Ino had taken advantage of the situation and ordered drinks for everyone. Don't get ahead of yourself, Ino, Shikamaru admonished with a frown. We don't know that yet. No? In case you didn't hear, that idiot Naruto is on a warpath by himself, Shika. Ino sat up and chugged the rest of her drink. Sakura glowered at Ino across the table and opened her mouth to say something when Sasuke raised his arm in front of her. She's right to be angry at him, he told her. Naruto's actions may lead to war. You can't blame her or anyone else for being angry, but he only went because of Jiraiya-sama, Sakura argued as though she were indignant on their former teammate's behalf. No one person, no matter who that person is worth more than an entire country, Sakura, Sasuke replied with wearing patience. You know that. He's right, Shikamaru nodded. I'll kick his ass when he gets back, Kiba said, baring his fangs. Just you watch. I'll rip him a new one. I'd like to see you try, Inuzuka. Sasuke sneered at the Inuzuka. Kiba growled aggressively. What, you want a piece of me too, pretty boy? Let's not start fighting amongst ourselves now. Shikamaru fell in before things escalated. What's done is done. All we can do now is pray he gets home safely. If he doesn't, we might have to go war anyway, Sakura thought out loud for a moment. Then, quickly catching her error, she feigned clarification. Because Tsunade-sama is so fond of him, you know? Sasuke merely shook his head, though he didn't seem too disappointed. Shikamaru looked at her sternly for a second but otherwise held his tongue. Yeah, what is up with that anyway? Ino looked across the table for the answer. How come Naruto is so close to Hokage-sama, and Jiraiya-sama for that matter? Now I think about it, the Sandaime was always really fond him too. Maybe it's pity. Kiba hazarded a guess between glaring at Choji, who eyed his section of the grill hungry. Don't even think about it. Perhaps there is more to Naruto than we know, Shino suggested in his monotone voice. What do we really know about him in the first place? Sakura, Sasuke and Shikamaru exchanged discreet looks. That doesn't make sense. Of course we know him. Ino disagreed. He's Naruto. We've known him since we were kids. You three were like best friends with him, she said, looked at Choji, Kiba and Shikamaru. We were detention buddies, that's about it. Kiba declined the very notion of friendship with the blonde. My ma was pretty pushy about being friends with him though. Same here, Choji said, sounding surprised. My dad always told me to be nice to him. I just thought he wanted me to make more friends. The Akimichi and Inuzuka looked at Shikamaru expectantly. My parents were the same, he admitted reluctantly, though he knew it was unlikely they'd figure out more. Now that I think about it, my mother told me to stay away from him, but my dad told me to decide for myself if he was nice, Ino said, wondering out loud. She told you the same thing, right, Sakura? It was a long time ago, Ino. I don't remember, Sakura lied before raising her glass of water to her lips to avoid further elaboration. Sasuke? Ino looked at the Uchiha. You're like Naruto's best friend. No, they didn't, Sasuke answered before she could finish her question. He didn't want to dampen the mood anymore by bringing up his deceased parents. And we're not best friends. That's Nara. You sound jealous, Shikamaru said jokingly with a lazy smile. Well, it's fine by me. You guys have hardly spent time with Naruto since graduation, so I guess that title goes to me by default, huh? For some reason they all laughed at that. Even Sasuke cracked a rare smile. Who knew how many times of smiles and laughter they had left? Kyuzugakure, Naruto followed his mark from a safe distance. One of his first instincts upon infiltrating the village had been to wreak havoc and level the entire damn village if he had to, but he knew better than to follow his most basic instincts. Before he could do anything, he needed to gather information. Hiruzen had taught him any shinobi worth his salt placed a great deal of importance in intelligence, especially when behind enemy lines, so the first thing Naruto had done in Kyuzugakure was simply to observe. He had always been proficient in blending in and giving people the slip when necessary. You didn't become a successful prankster in a shinobi village without a talent for stealth. He was as careful as possible when stalking around the village in plain sight to get a good bearing on his surroundings, the infrastructure, and the people. The headquarters of the village lay squarely in the middle of the village in the sizable military district. It was a military district surrounded by high, barbed wire walls, behind which neatly tended patches of tall grass lead to a courtyard and several smaller buildings. There were a great number of ceiling arrays in the vicinity, some of which were in plain sight and likely dummies, and others were hidden, various sentry squads marching about and guards on all nearby rooftops. Entry was strictly monitored, only certain shinobi were allowed in and out of the district, and hardly any of them appeared particularly strong, and thus Naruto came to the conclusion they were intelligence officers in charge of communicating with the outside under Sojan's watchful eyes. He had heard a great deal about the hidden grass leader since his arrival. Most of it was merely blind praise bordering on the fanatical, but every now and then he heard Kusanine discussing the cruelty he inflicted on others, including his own men. Naruto didn't want to think what the shogun had put Jiraiya through over the past year. It only made him more anxious, though he knew he couldn't afford to be impatient. If anything went wrong, there was no guarantee he could escape. It had troubled the Toad chieftain greatly when he told him, "We lost connection with Jiraiya shortly after he summoned Gamekin. Something made it impossible for us to reverse summon him. The same thing might happen to you, so be careful." Naruto knew he had hit a dead end with the village headquarters. There simply wasn't any conceivable way to successfully infiltrate the steel compound, uncover the information he sought, and withdraw. Perhaps Jiraiya could have pulled it off, but he sure as hell knew he couldn't. He was having a hard time keeping it together as it was. A true shinobi knew when to admit weakness. Hiruzen had taught him that. Thus came in the mark, a Kyuzugaku shinobi by the name of Hajime Isao, who served as an intelligence officer at the headquarters. Naruto had been following the Kusanine for a full week now after a few failed attempts to establish a routine with others. Out of all of his potential marks, Hajime Isao was easily the most routine, and therefore the most vulnerable. The intelligence officer woke up every morning at 5 a.m. and left his apartment at 5:30, stopping on the way by his favorite bakery on the way to work. He worked until 7 p.m. every day before being relieved. Hajime always went straight to home, where he would stay for about 2 hours before heading out for drinks at a bar nearby. A strange and rather risky choice of patronage for an intelligence officer, Naruto had thought, but true to his habits, Hajime always arrived at the bar around 9:15 p.m. and stayed there until any time before midnight, drunkenly stumbling home. He was troubled, that much was obvious, though he wasn't very vocal. He always sat at his regular spot close to the tap and drank by himself, ignoring everything and everyone around him. Naruto had seen him spur advances of attractive women without even looking at them. On this particular night, at 10:17 p.m. the mark left particularly early, probably due to the louder than usual music. Naruto followed the man from a fair distance. He had several clones in the area under disguise, though he had to be frugal with the way he managed his chakra. Kyuzugaku undoubtedly had some kind of barrier set up to detect, monitor, and track chakra signatures. If he allowed his large reserves to go unchecked, he would be found out in a matter of seconds. Fortunately, Hiruzen had taught him how to more efficiently manage his innate talent to suppress his vast amount of chakra. And now we take a right, Naruto thought as he stalked his mark. Huh! Much to his surprise, the man took a left turn instead and continued down the opposite direction. Is he so drunk he doesn't even know the way home? He briefly considered it but dismissed the notion. He had seen Hajime Isao consume his own weight in alcohol. The man was anything but a lightweight. Perhaps he was aware he was being tailed. It was a scary thought, and an all too real possibility. No, Naruto shook his head. He doesn't know I'm here. He didn't know why he was sure of it. There was a good chance he was being set up for a trap after all, though he argued with himself that if he was being lured into a trap, then surely his mark wouldn't have risked potentially spooking him like this by taking the opposite turn. It wouldn't make much sense. Right. As he continued to debate the merits of staying on his mark, the man stopped by a late-night pharmacy stand and offered the vendor a ticket he withdrew from his pocket. The vendor in return handed him a bag in return and bid him good night, though not without complaining about his patron's tardiness as he began to close up. Strange, Naruto thought, though he was relieved his concerns were unfounded. He wondered what the medicine was for. His man didn't look sick, at least not judging by appearance alone. Whatever it wasn't important, so he pushed the thought away and continued to follow the man home. Kusa no Kuni, Black Site 341. Get him on his feet and put the binders on him. Are we moving him? Jiraiya hung from the ceiling with his arms spread. He looked in even worse shape as the Black Site supervisor entered and gave instructions to his guard. After he killed the last interrogator, he'd been on the receiving end of several beatings that had left him looking even worse, though it was mostly just fresh lesions, bruises, and a broken rib or two. It wasn't anything he could handle. The supervisor, K, glanced to the Toad Sage, and then nodded once. Yes. Sojan-sama's orders. I was just getting used to this place, Jiraiya said tauntingly. Why? The guard asked. Don't question orders, the site supervisor said threateningly. He stopped by the door, looking to his prisoner for a moment. You look scared, K-chan, Jiraiya said, grinning menacingly. Did your master mention why you're moving me after a year? Maybe found more competent interrogators, huh? Silence. The guard reared back a whip, but the supervisor stopped with a raised hand and looked the Toad Sage in the eye, smiling. You might have some company soon. So the kid is on a warpath, huh? Jiraiya burst out in loud, hearty laughter, much to the Kusanine's confusion. You poor fools, you don't know who you pissed off, do you? Jiraiya curled his awkwardly curved broken fingers. They were amongst his latest injuries. The site supervisor snarled at the guard. Get ready to move him. Late at night, Kyuzugaku, the lights went out. Standing in the alley under heavy downpour, Naruto waited a few more minutes. It had taken his mark a longer time than usual to call it a night. He was completely drenched from top to bottom, but he hadn't left his position since, not even when the thunderclaps began. Several clones were stationed nearby carrying additional infiltration toads just in case. Now, he decided, making a straight line from the alley up the steps of the two-story apartment complex. He stopped and listened by the door. He'd broken into many places before in Konoha as a child, mostly when he was bored and had nobody to play with, which was a lot of the time, so he had gotten pretty good at picking locks, though it had been a while. Fortunately, he had waited long and patiently, and could afford to take his time. The door opened with a soft click. Naruto pushed in slowly and closed the door behind him. Click. He threw back his hood and looked across the hall. There was nothing noteworthy, some cheap art and withering flowers. He moved to the living room. Oddly enough, it was tidy and the smell of alcohol was nowhere to be found. Next was the kitchen. It too was clean. There weren't even dirty plates or utensils out. He resisted the urge to help himself to leftovers and moved on. His stomach growled, but it could wait. He froze as he heard the soft sounds of snoring coming from a room he passed on his way to the bedroom. Odd. The kodachi glinted under the rays of moonlight that penetrated through the blinds and drapes. He pushed the door and silently entered the second bedroom. Sure enough, he found his man soundly asleep on a futon. Naruto released a deep breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He gave himself a moment to steel his resolve and threw up his hood again before kneeling by the man. His hand covered the man's mouth, and his sword lingered mere centimeters from his jugular. Hajime Isao woke up with a startled look in his eyes. Not a sound or you die, Naruto whispered in a voice so cold and threatening part of him didn't recognize it for his own. You try to move or make a sound and I will kill you. Blink twice if you understand. Isao blinked twice. His eyes were filled with shock and fear. Good, Naruto whispered slowly. Before you get any smart ideas, I am not alone. There is no escape for you. If you try anything, you will die. Fortunately for you, I have absolutely no intention of killing you if you do as I say. Blink twice if you understand. Isao blinked twice again. Naruto lifted his hand and rose. On your feet, he ordered with a gesture of his sword. To the kitchen, now. Keep your hands where I can see them, or you lose them. As he said the words, the same part of him asked, Who am I? Isao did as told and moved with arms raised over his head. Please, the Kusanine began to plead. I don't know who you are or why you're here, but, good, let's keep it that way. Naruto cut him off as they entered the kitchen. Sit. He pushed the intelligence officer into a chair by the kitchen counter. Hajime Isao, correct? Isao nodded nervously. Yes, you're an intelligence officer at the headquarters in the military district. Don't try to deny it. I already know that for a fact, he said before the man could say otherwise. Do you have anything to eat? Check the fridge. Naruto looked around and found a light switch. He flipped it on and moved to the fridge with his sword still leveled at the man. I need information. I don't know if I can help you, Isao said immediately. I'm an intelligence officer, I won't deny that, but our intelligence network is very compartmentalized, so I don't know if… Is this red bean paste still good? Naruto retrieved a plastic container from the fridge and put it on the counter. Yeah? I think so. Naruto found a spoon in a drawer, noting he saw no knives or even forks, and peeled the lid off. Smells pretty good to me. He began to dig, and though his eyes didn't leave Isao. Aren't you going to heat that up? No. Despite it being cold, it was still edible. Hunger made even raw beans taste sweet. About a year ago, Sojan took Jiraiya of the Sannin for captive. I need to know where he is being held. Isao visibly tensed. I don't know anything about that. You really don't want to be lying to me right now, Naruto warned coldly. You work at the village HQ. There is no way you didn't receive any word on that. Look, I haven't received any transmissions myself, Isao stammered nervously. It's against protocol to even ask about what anyone else has received. That being said, I did hear rumors. Start talking. Oh, okay. So the rumor goes like this. Sojan-sama called for a summit to discuss matters above my pay grade. There was supposedly a spy at the meeting. Isao swallowed hard under his gaze. The spy was supposedly betrayed by one of the people there. The rumor says the spy Jiraiya the Gallant. Sojan supposedly defeated Jiraiya and had him dragged off to a black site for torture and interrogation. Naruto chewed in silence as he processed the information. So it was true, Jiraiya had been taken. And his own friend betrayed him. He pushed that matter aside. He would deal with Ishigekura later. Look, that's all I know, I swear. Isao promised frantically, put off by his silence. Please, you have to believe me. I don't know anything else. Keep your voice down, Naruto hissed, angrily tossing the food aside and closing the distance between them. He grabbed Isao by the neck and leant him over the countertop. Where is he being held? Tell me. I don't know. Isao gurgled between gasps for air. I swear, his grip tightened. I don't believe you. He lifted the man off his feet and dangled him several inches off the ground. I don't believe for 1 second you don't know anything. Who are you? Naruto froze, his eyes wide with shock as he turned and found a little boy in pajamas hugging a stuffed animal. He looked frail and sickly with tubes still attached to his arms. Let my daddy go, the little boy demanded. Lightning followed by the rumbling of thunder and Aisao's foot in his face sent him stumbling back in a dazed state. It hadn't hurt particularly, but it was most unexpected. By the time he had regained his bearings, Aisao had grabbed his discarded sword and charged at him. Naruto reacted in the nick of time and managed to stop him. It should have been easy for him to disarm the man, but there was such pure and instinctual desperation born from paternal instinct in Aisao's eyes that Naruto couldn't ignore as they struggled. The little boy watched on as their struggle across the kitchen sent pots and pans clattering and plates and glass shattering to the floor. Stop struggling! I'm not going to kill you unless you force me to. Run! Aisao shouted. There wasn't even a hint of concern for his own safety in his voice. Run, damn it! Naruto lost his patience very quickly, and their struggle ended as abruptly as it had started. Shit! Aisao lay bleeding on the floor, blood pouring from the stab wound to his lower abdomen. The little boy began to scream. Naruto felt his insides go cold. He looked to the little boy crying loudly. I didn't mean to. He felt a cold grip on his heart. Why was the kid here? Why the hell was his mark out drinking late at night when he had a sick kid at home? It didn't make any sense. The boy continued to cry loudly over his father's body. For a moment time seemed to stop as Naruto's mind wandered. Why do you think we fight, Naruto-kun? What do you mean, for country and village? Isn't that what they taught you in the academy? To put the village before yourself and the country before the village? What do you think it means? I don't know. To fight for the greater good, I guess. Ah, the greater good. You know, I've always hated that phrase. Naturally, being Hokage meant I had to make decisions under this notion that the means would be justified if it served some bigger purpose. But it never sat well with me. You're confusing me, old man. Picture this then, Naruto-kun. You are fighting a war, bravely and patriotically. For country and village, no? Can you justify the killing of others knowing that while your country may benefit of the war, your victory only adds to an endless cycle of conflict, of pain and misery? We kill them. They kill us. And for what? What is it all for? Do we fight so that one day the loved ones of those we kill exact revenge on those we love? I don't know. I didn't expect you to, Naruto-kun. These are simply the reflections of an old man whose time has long since passed him. If there is one thing I want to teach you, Naruto-kun, more than anything, more than any number of jutsu, it is that you should look to the actions of your predecessors and learn from them. You're talking about, what was it that Jiraiya called it? The cycle of hatred. And he was back. He found his wits and knew what to do. No matter what, he wouldn't rob the boy of his father. Not today. Not like this. He wouldn't allow his actions give birth to another sworn enemy of Konoha. It's okay, kid, the boy screamed when he picked him up, but there was no time to waste. He struck the boy with a light chop to the back of the neck, knocking him unconscious. He put him down in a corner and took a deep breath. His hand sparked green with medical ninjutsu chakra. He was far from an expert, he was hardly proficient, but he knew the basics, and with enough chakra that would do. My son! Aisao groaned, barely conscious, and gripped his hand. Naruto shook him off. He's fine. Why are you doing this? If it were just you, I'd let you die, Naruto said harshly. It was the truth. Had it been just the intelligence officer, he would have killed him without hesitation and moved on. But I'd rather not have to kill your kid some years down the line. That's the only reason I'm sparing you. Thank you? I'm not doing this for you. Naruto applied pressure to the wound with his chakra-coated hand as he pulled out the sword. Tell me what you know. I don't know much, I swear. But I do know Jiraiya the Gallant is still alive. Aisao grimaced with pain. I hear they haven't been able to break him, not even after all this time. That's all I know. I swear. Naruto didn't acknowledge the man, though he felt a pinch of relief to hear confirmation his godfather still lived, and that he continued to endure. He finished patching up the intelligence officer and rose to his feet. Don't make me regret doing this. Naruto turned around and headed towards the exit. He knows you're here. Aisao whispered on the verge of slipping into unconsciousness. Naruto didn't know why that didn't surprise him at least a little. He simply nodded as he headed out. When you wake up, grab your kid and get far from here. Moments later, Naruto was running through alleys again, his footsteps silent and not making a sound as he raced through the shadows towards the heart of the village. Sojan knew he was here? He knew that already. Of course he knew. He might have infiltrated the village, but he wasn't the spy Jiraiya was, and even Jiraiya had been found out when he spied on the hidden grass. No, Naruto hadn't been so arrogant or foolish to think he could evade detection indefinitely. He knew going in that it was only a matter of time before they found him out, and until they did he would do his best to cover Jiraiya's location. His time was up. There was only escape now. Jiraiya would have likely been moved to a more secure location by now. He had failed to rescue his godfather. Naruto swallowed the bitterness and the self-loathing, ruthlessly pushing his emotions down as he blitzed past several oblivious Kusanine. He might have failed, but he wasn't done in the village yet. There was still something he had to do. Konoha. Tsunade massaged her temples in between dealing with paperwork. It was nearly morning and she was still hard at work. The fact entire village and country was set on combat-ready status didn't mean there would be less of it. It was actually the opposite. Last-minute authorizations forms, schedule changes, equipment orders and quota reports. There simply wasn't an end to the files upon files that were coming in. Every last bureaucratic order was being crammed in one day. Tsunade-sama? The Godame hadn't even noticed her apprentice enter her office. Kakashi would have cried his heart out if he were there. It was rather worrying, but she ignored it. What is it, Sakura? You're busy. I can come back later, the Rosette offered. No, Tsunade said a tad too quickly. Her student was a welcome distraction. What is it? Sakura considered her words carefully. Tsunade-sama, what are we going to do if Naruto doesn't come back? Why do you ask? Tsunade's expression turned mildly suspicious. We'll disavow him, of course. He's just a chunin. We can't go to war over him. I see. Sakura looked downcast. Tsunade crossed her arms and leant back. What did you think I was going to say? I don't know. I'm sorry for bothering you, Tsunade-sama. Sakura bowed her head and turned to leave. Her hand gripped the door handle. What am I doing? She thought to herself. You know, don't you? Tsunade prompted her to turn around. About the Kyubi and Naruto, I mean. You're not a very good liar, Sakura. I only had my suspicions, Tsunade-sama. Sakura tried anyway, though not for own sake, but rather that of Shikamaru, who had included her in his theory. So Naruto really is a Jinchuriki? Yes, Tsunade nodded, smiling for some reason unknown to her protégé. Then you know why it's important we get him back. I have a lot to apologize for to him, Sakura said with her head hung in shame. This entire country does, Sakura, Tsunade said neutrally. She didn't know all the facts, but she did know her student hadn't always been as protective of the Jinchuriki as she was now. People change, Sakura, and I know for a fact you have. You'll have your chance to make it up to him when he gets back, which he will. I'm sure he'd be happy to know you're worried about him. We all are, Sakura nodded. Even Sasuke, not that he'd admit it, but I can tell he's worried too, Tsunade sighed. I know what that's like. He'll definitely come back home safely, right? Sakura asked, hoping that her teacher would provide some assurances, though she knew it was childish of her. Naruto has trained under Sandaime-sama. He should be really strong, right? There are a lot of strong people out there, Sakura, Tsunade reminded her as she stood up to stretch her legs. I'm sure he'll come back with that same old goofy grin of his. I'll make sure to knock the shit out of him when he does. Sakura giggled a little. I should go find Rei-san tomorrow. She must be worried sick about him. You should go do that. She can probably use a friend now. It can't be easy being involved with that blonde idiot, Tsunade encouraged the Rosette. Now off with you. I've got work to do. Got it, Tsunade-sama. Sakura was once again the door, though before she left, a pillar of smoke appeared before them and a small and elderly toad in a black cloak hopped on Tsunade's desk. Fukasaku-sama? The Godame said, surprised. Tsunade-chan, I have urgent news. Fukasaku said gravely. Kyusugakure headquarters. Sojan looked over the village from behind his office windows, arms folded behind his back, his wrinkled visage in a thoughtful expression. He usually wasn't up this late. He was too old for such unhealthy sleeping habits. But tonight was different. Something was about to happen. He could feel it. Whatever it was going to be problematic. The door to his office opened and a middle-aged kunoichi wearing a bandana to cover her hair and the standard Kyusugakure attire entered. She was heavily scarred in the face. As the personal assistant to the shogun, she was the only one in the village that could enter his office without explicit permission. Sojan-sama, Natsuki, what is it? There was a disturbance at the residence of one of our intelligence operatives, the assistant reported apprehensively. The operative was injured but is in stable condition. It appears the intruder is on the move, sir. Suddenly the bad feeling in Sojan's stomach made sense. He had been content with a monster hiding in his village, unbeknownst that his presence known to others, for it would only make it easier to trap it. Now that the monster had no reason to hide in the shadows, there was no telling what would happen. Sojan turned to his assistant. Natsuki, before he could even feel his sentence, he knew it was too late. No, he felt it. A gigantic chakra suddenly spiked throughout the village. Kusagakure skies, several hundred feet in the air. Naruto stood on the back of Senzaru. He began to spike his chakra. There was an odd, dampened look in his eyes. Their usual spark was gone, and replaced by a darker, colder look that only hinted at the cold rage he felt inside his heart. His melancholic rage was not lost on the falcon. I'm sorry, Jiraiya. His fist shook uncontrollably as he looked down to the village. I couldn't save you this time, but I'll come back for you. I promise. Until that time came, though, he would show Sojan that there was every reason to fear Konoha. He would show the entire wood that the hidden leaf was not to be trifled with. No one would ever hurt those he cared about ever again. He wouldn't allow it. Perhaps this would shatter their resolve to challenge Konoha. Maybe then there wouldn't have to be a war. Are you sure about this, Naruto-sama? Senzaru asked tentatively. The falcon was beyond terrified of its summoner, whose chakra had lost all warmth and brightness and turned cold like the quiet before the storm. I sent word to father, but there is still time to. I'm sure, Senzaru. Naruto placed both thumbs under his fangs and bit down hard. The pain barely registered as he began to form a string of hand seals. I'm going to show them that Konoha still has a monster they can fear. Naruto leapt off the falcon's back and began to plummet to the ground. The tiny village quickly became bigger and bigger as he soared through the air in straight trajectory for the heart of the military district. It was time. Kuchiyos no Jutsu. Tremendous volumes of chakra surged through his arms and gave way to one gigantic cloud of smoke over the village as gigantic toads and falcons fitted in battle armor descended upon the military district. Go wild! The gigantic toads came down crashing into buildings, instantly flattening them as they grabbed their weapons and shields and unanimously roared as one. For Gamaken! Chapter 24, Warpath. Kusagakure. For Gamaken! The warrior toads descended from the heavens like a force of madness and destruction. They were truly fearsome behemoths, clad in thick ornate Mount Mayaboku armor and helmets, clutching giant weapons and shields as they released a unanimous battle cry. The 7 toads flattened entire buildings as they met the ground, and literally moved the earth as they sent quakes and tremors resonating throughout the entire hidden grass village. Naruto followed airborne as part of a cast of 7 very large peregrine falcons donning armor of their own. The falcons broke away to carry out their mayhem as he softened his descent and landed on top of Gamabunta's head. The falcons flew overhead. Some set upon the watchtowers and others plucked shinobi from the ground only to let them plummet to their deaths. Others playfully passed the shinobi around from beak to beak in the air, like predators playing with their food. Naruto took a knee to pat the toad chief. Thanks, boss. Don't worry about it, kid, Gamabunta croaked, leading the charge amongst his warrior toads. Take Gamahiro and go find that son of a bitch that took Jiraiya. Gamahiro! Naruto ran across the toad chieftain's arm and jumped on the dual sword-wielding toad that was his familiar. To that building there. He pointed towards the main building of the military district a significant distance away. The man that took Jiraiya and killed Gamaken is there. We're going to pay him a visit, Ribbit! Gamahiro croaked through flared nostrils. The toad had always looked up to Gamaken ever since he had been a little tadpole. The honor of avenging his friend was his. Let's go! Naruto situated himself atop the green toad's head and nodded. They set off with frightening speed as the other toads and falcons continued to wreak havoc across the hidden grass village. The plan was to stay in the military district. Naruto didn't want to spill the blood of innocents, nor would he allow his summons to do so. He was relieved they had come to that understanding as the largest of the falcons. The falcon Lord Hyutsum swooped down and crushed a kusanine in his beak. Gamahiro set off to the sky with a tremendous leap and soared. Naruto could see fires spreading throughout the entire military district as the toads demolished buildings and spat oil that they set alight with giant flints, resulting in miniature tsunamis of boiling oil sweeping across the district. Not even a shinobi village could withstand their wrath after one of their own had been slain. The Kusa shinobi scrambled, still overtaken by shock and fear. Naruto narrowed his eyes when suddenly demon face-shaped fires began to blaze at them and several narrowly missed his head. Gamahiro grunted through the pain. The Jinchuriki formed a single hand seal and spat a large body of water towards the source of the onslaught. Suijin Hiki. The demon lanterns continued to collide into the water wall as Gamahiro crashed and continued to crawl over smaller buildings towards the center of the military district. Naruto relented his water jutsu when the fire blast stopped. Whoever had just attacked them had suddenly given up and disappeared. He readied himself. We're getting close, Gamahiro. We've got company. The dual sword-wielding toad said as giant beetle summons appeared before them, crashing through buildings. Go! I'll take care of these two. I will meet up with you later. There wasn't any time to argue, so Naruto simply nodded and cast aside his poncho. He pulled his sleeves up, pressed his wrists together, and then manipulated his bracer to split into two smaller pieces that wrapped around his wrists and covered his gloves and fingers like skeletal gauntlets. They would significantly decrease the stress on his hands. It was all in preparation for his vastly improved jutsu. I can't thank you enough, old man. Naruto leapt off Gamahiro's head and blasted off. Sway Shinsho. He flew faster and higher than he could have dreamt of a year ago, and it wouldn't have been possible without the Sandame's advice and training. His propulsion palm was a different beast now than it had once been. The Kusanine atop the giant beetles directed their summons towards Naruto, but he simply dodged their giant limbs and flew past them. Tear them apart, Gamahiro. Bit. Naruto seemed to slow down for just a second before setting off at an even greater speed, rocketing across the military district, flying past the scattering debris and fresh fires, and a number of various insect summons that tried to swat him down on the way. He also had to dodge a fair number of ninjutsu and projectiles hurled his way, though he hardly had to try. A fluttering noise caught his attention just in time as he banked right and looked over his shoulder. A giant dragonfly was upon him, ridden by a Kusanine with white, waist-length hair covered by a green bandana. Katan Onodoro. Fiery apparition sparked to life from thin air and gave chase. So it was you. Naruto flew in an spiraling upwards trajectory, dodging the demon lanterns with relative ease at the start given their unimpressive speed, but it quickly became increasingly more difficult as more and more of the apparitions bore after him like heat seekers. Maybe that's what they were. Who knew? He sure as hell didn't. He couldn't waste any time. Gamahiro hadn't stayed behind for nothing. Naruto slowed down as he began to gain even more altitude with one hand whilst he charged chakra to his right hand. Futon, Senpuken! He turned and punched the air as he directed his whirlwind fist to collide with the demon lanterns, setting off a chain reaction of explosions forming into one and fizzling with a blanket of smoke. In the spur of the moment, Naruto followed his instincts and flew towards the source of fiery apparitions using the smoke as cover. The Kusanine hadn't anticipated his sudden turn, much less the kick in the face sending them flying off the giant dragonfly. Much to Naruto's own surprise, the Kusanine didn't go down without a fight and managed to fire a few more demon lanterns that caught him off guard and nearly cost him a lot more than merely the hem of his sleeve. The dragonfly swung its long abdomen and dove to catch its summoner. Moments later they were upon him again, firing away with fire jutsu that became increasingly more dangerous, as different colors of demon lanterns gave chase. As if the regular red flame lanterns weren't a pain enough in the way that they multiplied and acted like heat seekers, the blue lanterns were especially fast, the green ones were slower but exploded with a wider range, and the yellow ones were a combination of speed and explosions that had a shorter lifespan. Suffice to say, his opponent was a pain, and was going to be bother until neutralized, so Naruto decided to do just that, by slowing down and landing atop an abandoned watchtower. Giving up, intruder? The Kusanine called as the dragonfly hovered above him. A wise decision. Call off your summons and surrender. Naruto got a better look at his harasser, a kunoichi with waist-length white hair covered by a green bandana and odd gray eyes with circular patterns. She wore black shinobi trousers, a beige sleeveless kimono over a green top with only one long sleeve covering her left arm, both of which were covered in bandages up to her elbows. 1. Naruto patted the singed phrase of his tunic, putting out a few embers that managed to latch onto him. You're persistent, I'll give you that, and you're quite foolish if you think you can attack Kusugakure and get away with it. The kunoichi shot back, standing on the dragonfly's back. Listen, I'm in a hurry, so tell you what, you stay out of my way and I won't kill you, Naruto offered straightforwardly, knowing she'd probably be insulted more than anything but giving it a try nonetheless. The clock was ticking. Maybe after I'm done tearing Sojan limb from limb we can pick up where we left off. What do you say, you impudent little shit? A clone jumped out of nowhere behind his harasser, hands clasped together, and head rearing back as it suddenly, with greater speed than the kunoichi could have anticipated, spat a great volume of mud, aiming not for her, but rather the dragonfly she rode. Doria Taiga! The kunoichi discarded the clone with a kunai, but the damage was done, so she jumped off the flying insect and let it return to from whence it came to save Chakra. Naruto met her on the ground and wasted no time in overpowering her with sheer brute strength and brutality. He broke through her guard like a wrecking ball and threw her aside to a sprawl on the ground. He twisted her arms behind back with one hand and held a kunai to her throat in the other. He rose the blade and was about to bring it down to impale the back of her skull, but found himself unable to go through with it when he saw her peculiar eyes fraught with fear. It shouldn't have made a difference to him. He should have been able to kill her and be done with it. But no matter how much he willed himself to do it, he simply couldn't. Fuck it! He knocked her out instead, with a blow to the back of the head, and got off her. Mighty caws rang through the sky as he found the falcons reveling in their air superiority over the ground forces of Kusanine. They reminded him what he was there for, who his real enemy was. He hadn't come to Kusa to take lives he didn't need to take. That wasn't him. It simply wasn't in his nature, and he would never allow it to be. His true enemy was just one man, and if he could just take out Sojan, then maybe Kusa would know better than to provoke Konoha. Perhaps then there wouldn't be a war, and the lives he did take today would be justified in the end. Amigakure. Pain stood atop the tongue of the north-facing humanoid face of his tower, his eyes focused on the far distance where he knew Kusa no Kuni to be. Akatsuki's intelligence network had passed word of the presence Konoha's Jinchuriki in Kusa some time ago. The god of pain had been pensive ever since. He could feel something was coming, something he couldn't fully anticipate or even understand. He had a feeling it had something to do with the Jinchuriki in Kusa. This could be problematic. What is it, Nagato? Conan called from behind him in the tower. She preferred to stay out of the rain lest it ruin her paper. I don't know, Pain said through the mouth of Ihiko. The reanimated body looked confused on his part. It's as though there is a haze in front of me that not even I can see through clearly. I feel as though I am close to it, as though it is a familiar feeling, but its true nature eludes me. Is it the Kyubi Jinchuriki? The paper goddess asked. Pain didn't answer at first. It was a question he did not know the answer to. Was it the Jinchuriki of Konoha? Surely not. What was so special about the boy to begin with? He hesitated to dismiss it outright. After all, what had been so special about him before he awakened the Rinnegan, before he became a god? Perhaps, he conceded after a long pause. Send word to Kakuzu. I want him to go to Kusa. We bided our time long enough. He is to see to it the Jinchuriki is brought here alive for extraction. We shall begin collecting the biju with the Kyubi. Is that all? Yes, Pain said as the angel began to dissolve into countless sheets of paper and took flight. Kanehigakure. He's attacking Kusa? Tsunade could hardly believe her ears. Her eyes were set in a wide stare. Now, Fukasaku nodded gravely. He contacted Gamabunta and Hyutsum of the Falcons about an hour ago for their support in this, siege. Naturally, Gamabunta accepted and took 6 of his finest warriors with him. I believe the Falcon Lord has matched that number with his honor guard. I don't even know why I'm surprised. Tsunade began to pace about her office, biting her thumbnail in thought. She thought she would be ready for this, to hear that Naruto had done something so outrageous and dangerous it would force her to react. But of all things she considered he would do, she hadn't anticipated he would openly attack an entire shinobi village by himself. That was lunacy. He must have realized he couldn't rescue Jiraiya, so he thought he'd go for the next best thing, Sojan's head. This is very serious, Fukasaku said, a frown on his wrinkled green skin. The falcons and toads are both represented as part of the 12 Deva. The war of your kind may very well spread to the animal kingdoms. Sakura stood stunned up until that moment, and was brought out of her haze of confusion and shock only by the prospect of new knowledge. The 12 Deva? It's a special council in the animal kingdoms considered to be the highest authority. Whatever they say goes. Tsunade found distraction from her concerns in giving the explanation. Konoha is particularly lucky to be associated with 4 of the 12 Devas, the apes, the toads, the slugs, and now, through Naruto, the falcons. We used to have the snakes on our side until that slimy bastard Orochimaru defected. Due to the nature of summoning contracts between humans and animals, sometimes human conflicts become ours and sometimes the opposite applies, Fukasaku supplied helpfully. The old toad's frown deepened. I fear such a time is upon us. How is Naruto pulling all this off by himself? Sakura asked whilst her master continued to pace around in her thoughts. I know he trained under Sandaime-sama, but it's only been a year. I have yet to meet him myself, but Enma-sama speaks very highly of him, which is rare in and of itself, Fukasaku said, looking away from Tsunade. If I were you, young lady, the toad looked to Sakura now, I would forget all preconceived notions you have of him. Sakura nodded dumbly. It was a lot to take in, to say the least. The last time she had seen her former teammate, he was fighting Sasuke. A year later, and he was fighting a shinobi village. By himself. It was mind-boggling to think he could have improved so much in such a short time. Then she remembered he was a Jinchuriki, and that he always been full of surprises, and that he was the type that could push boundaries and shatter limits for the sake of others, like he had done when he took on Gaara to save her. If he had gone so far for her, then there was no doubt he would do the same for Jiraiya. I can use this, Tsunade realized suddenly as she stopped pacing about her office and went to her desk. Sakura, go fetch Shizen. Tsunade-sama? Now, the Godame ground out urgently. I can use this. I'm going to punch the living hell out of him when I see him, but I can use this. Sakura didn't know what her master was talking about, but decided it was best she not ask, and nodded as she left the office. What are you doing, Tsunade-chan? Fukasaku asked of her. Following Naruto's example, Tsunade smiled outwardly as she sat down and began to draft a letter. We can't stop Naruto from attacking Kusa, but we sure as hell as can make it look as though it were sanctioned. That'll put Kusa's allies at great unease, Fukasaku caught on quickly. The old toad smiled slyly. You're a devious one, Tsunade-chan. I make do with what I've got, Tsunade smirked back. Kyuzugakure. Sojan watched the chaos and mayhem unfold from his office window as the warrior toads and falcons wreaked havoc upon his beloved village. He stood silent and unmoving, his arms folded behind his back as he observed the devastation unfold. The entire building shook under the weight of warrior toads and the aerial assaults unleashed by the falcons that crashed into his towers and used the sizable chunks of concrete as payloads. Sojan-sama, the hidden grass leader's secretary, spoke up. What are your orders? The men know what to do. Sojan didn't turn to look at his secretary. He was more preoccupied with the enormous chakra signal coming his way at an increasingly faster pace. Natsuki, you should get somewhere safe. My place is with you, Sojan-sama. The proud Kusa Kunoichi stood firm. I will never leave your side. Sojan looked over his shoulder, a kind smile on his scarred face. Thank you, Natsuki. Now that I think about it, there is something you could do for me. Anything, Sojan-sama. The hidden grass leader looked through the window one last time as Konoha's Jinchuriki landed. Kyuzugakure Military District Courtyard. Naruto touched down lightly in the courtyard leading to the headquarters. He immediately felt watched and searched the building. An elderly man stood by the window looking down upon him. He was a tall, old man with white hair and tan skin covered in scars. The man looked at him for a moment and then turned away, disappearing from sight. Sojan. He started to approach the building with purpose in his steps. The ceiling arrays began to glow, alerting guards and activated defense mechanisms. He could have exercised finesse and stealth to avoid setting them off, but there was no need for it. Now that he had seen the man that had taken Jiraiya and had threatened the lives of his people, his mind was elsewhere. He felt neither anger nor resentment. There was no fear or fury in his steps. There was only the objective and calm resolution to carry it out. This man has to die. It had nothing to do with revenge anymore. As Uzumaki Naruto, he wanted nothing more than to avenge Jiraiya. As Konoha's Jinchuriki, he knew Shogun no Sojan had to die in order to prevent the deaths of countless others. It was all so simple, so clear. He was in a state of calm, or as Hiruzen would often to refer to it, switched on. It was a state of mind he rarely entered of his own volition, one that he was never truly aware of until after it had happened, one that he usually only entered in his initial Jinchuriki mode when his body and mind could not keep up with Kyubi's influences and instinctively compensated by pushing aside all emotions and distractions so that he could remain calm and collected, focused. 2. The few times he had managed to enter such a zone of pure concentration of focus on his own occurred during his training under Hiruzen. That usually meant mastering a difficult jutsu or going all out during one of their more intense spars. Hiruzen had told him that his mother had been much the same. Uzumaki Kushina, in defiance of her Uzumaki heritage, was never one for studying, but could concentrate and engage with any subject matter better than anyone else when she needed to. As Naruto began to approach, he knew he was ready to fight. So when the paved ground began to shake and give form to a giant warrior of solid rock, he calmly maintained his step, holding out his clenched fist, which he then used to blitz through the stone giant, causing chunks of rock and dirt to explode and scatter. He was no Tsunade, but one didn't train with the apes of Mount Konguren without gaining some significant physical strength. Naruto touched the ground lightly and continued to approach the building. He waved his hand and redirected bolts of lightning with wind manipulation, and then formed 3 hand seals for an earth wall jutsu that usually required 12 to defend him from a series of cutting wind blasts that chipped away at his wall before eventually subsiding as the seal responsible ran out of chakra and had to recharge. The defense mechanism subsided as dozens of guards came marching his way. There were 40 of them and only one him, and yet they were both outmatched and outnumbered beyond hope. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto created 50 clones, though only half advanced to meet the Kusanine head-on. The rest kneeled and began to channel chakra into the ground. Hiruzen had been adamant he learn how to dismantle Fuin Jutsu, and now he saw the value of that lesson. He doubted the seals around the headquarters had been created with Biju chakra in mind. As his clones focused their attention on corroding the seals with Biju chakra, he disappeared from sight by means of Shunshin no Jutsu, surging into motion faster than the Kusanine could keep track of. A second later he kicked the guard captain in the back of the knees, forcing him to kneel while he pulled his back. Then he forced the captain's sword-wielding hand to slit his own throat. The sword clattered to the ground and blood sprayed from the guard captain's neck as he picked the man up by his flak jacket and cast him aside like a rag doll. In battle, the loss of morale and leadership could be more detrimental than anything. Hiruzen had taught him that, and he had robbed the Kusanine of both simply by killing their captain. More than a few were foolish enough to continue to attack, or perhaps it was out of instinct more than anything. Whatever the reason, it didn't matter. The few that got past his clones roared as they tried to land their blows to no avail. He read the movements like an open book, swaying like a leaf in the wind to their unfocused and telegraphed movements. Naruto unsheathed his kodachi. His blade flashed into motion, and seconds later a dozen bodies fell to the ground. He tore through them with ease, sliced and cutting away without regard for who they were or what they felt as he cut them down. He shut it all out. They were simply in the way, obstacles that needed to be removed from his path. Whether that meant he had to push them aside or step over their corpses, it didn't matter. He simply couldn't let it, for he knew he would lose all resolve once he did. The remaining Kusanine tried to fight him with ninjutsu. Streams of fire, rippling earth, and jets of water were all aimed at him. He blurred out of sight, moving out of the way and repositioned behind another cluster of guards. He swung his free hand back as rippling green and white chakra flowed over his limb and grew longer and sharper. Futon Senpahoko. Naruto impaled a guard in the back with the whirlwind lance and lifted him off his feet, dangling him over a pool of his own blood. He released the guard and then dispatched another 3 Kusanine. His clones made quick work of those nearby them as he stopped mere feet away from the headquarters. One brave Kusanine remained standing in front of the building, his entire body shaking in absolute terror. Naruto wordlessly ordered his fighting clones to stand back and held out his hand, charging a sizable Rasengan. The Kusa screamed as he made his last stand and charging at him. Naruto ducked under first strike and didn't allow him a second as he smashed the Rasengan in his chest. Tsuho Rasengan. 3. Naruto pushed with considerable force as the sphere of chakra expanded several hundred times upon contact with its target, and barreled towards the headquarters building with such velocity it shattered the protective fuin that were meant to keep him out. The ensuing explosion was deafening. A gaping hole remained where the entrance once was. Naruto blew on his steaming hand. The banishing Rasengan was powerful but required far more physical exertion and usually would lead to mild chakra burns. He watched his hand with interest as the skin began to mend itself. Kusugakure headquarters. The explosion rocked the entire building with enough force to cause grains of dust to fall from the ceiling. There was considerable chaos and fear amongst the Kusanine as they scrambled to get out of the way. They had seen what the Leaf's monster was capable of from a distance. Most of them weren't suited for combat with regular shinobi, let alone a furious Jinchuriki with more chakra than all of them combined and a plethora of ninjutsu to go along with it. Sojan-sama, the entrance has been destroyed. A Kusanine reported frantically, barging into the office. The shogun stood with his back turned to the door and fitted the last of his combat attire, a pair of brown leather arm protectors over his lime green kimono. Thank you, he nodded calmly. Make sure you evacuate everyone. Understood, Sojan smiled grimly. He had lived a great many years for a shinobi, fought in more than his fair share of battles, and had endured more challenges than most would in 10 lifetimes, and yet, he had faced death only once before. He had been a young man then, not much older than Uzumaki Naruto was now. Kusa no Kuni had been embroiled in civil war for several years. Countless had died in the war for the daimyo's greed and arrogance. As their numbers fell, children were conscripted to fight, or die rather, as few ever survived their first battle. Sojan was born the youngest of 5. He had 3 older brothers and 1 sister. His parents, humble farmers exempted from the war and relied upon for their produce, were given no choice but to part with at least one of their children for the sake of the war effort. His father, a man who had rarely spoke more than a few words to him at time, had considered him the most expendable. As a quiet, withdrawn boy little over 10 years old, he wasn't of much use compared to his older brothers, who had several years on him and could inherit their father's land and be married off. If there was one thing Sojan would always respect his father for, despite everything, it was for his ruthless pragmatism. His father had the ability to make hard decisions when they had to be made for the greater good of his family. Of course, his mother had fought to keep him, as any mother would, but ultimately it was not her decision to make. To this day he vividly remembered her wailing, her tears and anguished screams as he quietly bid them farewell from the back of the cart that carried him away along with all other children of his rural neighborhood. Upon arriving at camp he received basic combat training. For the following 2 years he served in the infantry. Most children weren't expected to fight like men. No, they were far more useful as spies and messengers, and when necessary, suicide units. Sojan lost most of his friends in the very first battle, and to this day, nearly 60 years later, he counted it amongst his worst. It wasn't the fighting that haunted him, for he did not fight in that battle. No, it was the sounds of battle, the screams and images of people bleeding and dying in the dirt, and above all, the glazed-over eyes of the dead he hid under in a ditch. He held himself throughout that entire battle, shaking uncontrollably under a mound of bodies, many of which of the very same children he had set out from his village. 3 years after joining the army he was recruited by Kyubi to join their ranks as a shinobi, alongside the few children that had survived that long. The training was brutal, but those that survived it were like gods compared to mere infantrymen. Sojan took the shinobi arts faster and better than anyone. His potential was seemingly limitless, and so they entrusted him with the village's most coveted jutsu, the razor grass dragon. More than this strength, however, the Kusanin valued him for his intellect, for his devious mind, the same ruthless pragmatism his father had shown when he sent his youngest, seemingly most invaluable son to die in battle. For the next 4 years he would fight as a shinobi. He quickly rose through the ranks. He was unbeatable. No one could touch him, or so he believed, until that fateful day came he finally tasted defeat. The enemy was losing. They simply couldn't fight on equal terms with their inferior numbers of infantry and shinobi. They were desperate enough to turn to mercenaries. Amongst the mercenaries was the one man that Sojan had ever feared, a man he respected to this day, Kakuzu. It was far from a close battle. For all his intellect and might, the young Sojan was simply outclassed in every way. They lost the battle shortly after it began. His allies dropped like insignificant flies, insects flattened under the heel of the former Takigakure shinobi. Eventually he, too, fell. Kakuzu would not kill him, however. Perhaps he had seen something in him like the Kusanin had. Perhaps it was the fact he had no heart Kakuzu wanted. It certainly wasn't pity that spared him. Whatever it was, he was spared that day. He shortly disappeared from sight after the battle was lost. Eventually the war was won, for the enemy could only afford hiring mercenaries for so long until their resources ran, and the daimyo remained supreme, until the day he too would hang on the shogun's orders. Though it wasn't until years later that Sojan would reappear to claim the country, in a bloody campaign during which he was once again reunited with Kakuzu, a man he could now call his ally, who helped him become the man he was today. It has been many years since I first tasted defeat, Sojan thought as he reached for his weapon of choice, a staff with a 3-pronged head and intricately designed tassels with spirals on them. And yet I feel the same aura in the air now as I did then. The hidden grass leader prepared himself mentally. Natsuki would do well to carry out the task he entrusted her with. His opponent was young and inexperienced, but it was that inexperience that had allowed him to successfully cripple an entire village without reservation for tactics or fear for the consequences. This was an enemy Sojan knew he could not underestimate. A haze of ash began to cloud the building and spill into the office. Naruto stood by the entrance with his hands in the tiger seal. He wasn't foolish enough to enter a building that likely had defensive mechanisms of its own. No, he had kicked down the door not to enter, but rather, to announce his presence. Sojan had yet to greet him, however, so he decided to ring the bell. "Come and greet your guests, Sojan," he thought as he continued to spew a cloud of ash from his mouth. The clones finished dismantling the ceiling arrays and promptly dismissed themselves. Summoning 14 toads and falcons took a serious toll on his chakra. He would need to save enough so he could dismiss them. The falcons would be fine without it, but the toads would have a much tougher time getting home. Now, he decided as he ignited the ash with his chakra and jumped back to retreat to a safe distance. Katan, Heizakisho no Jutsu, A flash preceded the fiery blast that went off in the headquarters. The ash pile burning set alight everything it had come into contact with. Fire roared and shattered through the windows, and erupted to the skies, raining debris over the courtyard. Naruto dodged a few chunks of concrete. The heat was getting to him. He wiped the sweat off his forehead, eyes focused on the dark, soot-filled smoke billowing from the headquarters ruins. Shogun no Sojan strode through the smoke and debris seemingly unharmed, and ready for battle now that he wore leather armor over his kimono robes, and clutched a staff in his hand. Naruto got a good look at the man for the first time. This was the man he had come to kill, the man whose death would end the Fourth Shinobi World War before it even began. Sojan was tall and had a slim build, one amber eye and shoulder-lengthy gray hair tied up in a ponytail and a lengthy goatee. Scars covered every inch of tan skin. He wasn't much to look at, but Naruto knew better than to judge anyone by his or her appearance. There was a quiet, reserved dignity in the shogun's steps, and an intimidating aura that shimmered in his amber-colored eye. Sojan stared at him as they sized up one another. Naruto was taken aback by the man's surprisingly soft tone of voice. Uzumaki Naruto, Sojan, he returned with matching composure. The shogun looked to the distance as another tower fell to Hyutsum the Falcon Lord. I see you have made quite a mess of my village. Naruto held the much older shinobi's one-eyed gaze as he tried to get a read on him. At least I've left out innocents. Oh? Sojan chuckled the same way Hiruzen did every now and then. It infuriated Naruto that he inadvertently likened the man he despised to the man he respected the most and saw as his own grandfather. Do you truly believe that? Sojan asked with seemingly genuine curiosity. That this will not inevitably cost the lives of innocents on both sides. Young man, you do realize your actions are a declaration of war, do you not? As far as I'm concerned, you declared war when you took my godfather, Naruto replied evenly. He willed himself to maintain his calm. He fought better when he kept his emotions in check. Your godfather? Sojan looked at him bemused for a moment. I see. Regardless, the nature of your relationship matters little. It was your godfather that was caught infiltrating a closed summit between shinobi of various nations. Espionage is a part of the world we live in, this we both know, but the ramifications for being caught are rarely anything short of severe. The shogun cleared his throat. As far as I am concerned, Uzumaki Naruto, Hai no Kuni declared war on Kusa no Kuni, and now I have the justification required to marshal my allies. Naruto shook his head, smiling humorlessly. You've got it wrong, old man. Oh, you declared war against me when you took Jiraiya. Naruto stretched out his hand and called forth his chakra, molding it into a lance of white and green chakra. It just took me a while to notice. Sojan raised his staff and tapped the ground. It's fortunate I get to face you while you are still young, the amber-eyed shinobi admitted. I would not like to know my odds if I allowed you to live to meet your potential. Enough words had been said. Naruto rushed forward with his senpouhoko and clashed with a spherical barrier, mere inches away from his target. Sojan provoked him with a smirk behind the transparent dome. Naruto pushed the whirlwind lance forward aggressively, sending the hidden grass leader flying, dome and all, into a nearby supply building. No significant damage was done. Sojan simply tapped the dome with his staff to repair the hairline cracks that formed, a confident smile still on his wrinkled face. Brute force will get you nowhere, boy. Naruto let the insult slide. He wouldn't allow it to disrupt the calm state of mind he was struggling to maintain. His opponent tapped the ground with his staff as he released his whirlwind lance and formed a string of hand seals. He puffed his chest seconds before he spewed a torrent of flames so great in volume it covered a third of the entire courtyard, dwarfing both of them and enveloping the entire barrier sphere. The heat alone was enough to kill a grown man. Katan, Ryuka no Jutsu, Fukahoin. Black markings appeared on the dome and sucked in the flames like a vacuum. As the flames disappeared, Sojan remained standing unharmed, and seemingly unaffected by the heat of the flames. The barrier had protected him even from something like that. Naruto realized much to his displeasure. Kenjutsu Futon Katan, Sojan listed in drawl. What will you show me next? Naruto summoned another lance, and took off with a one-handed propulsion palm. He gained significant altitude, and then charged towards the barrier at a sharp 45-degree angle. At this velocity he figured he could manage enough momentum and force to do more damage than a few hairline fractures. Much to his surprise, Sojan directed his barrier dome to take flight and met him midair. Most of Naruto phased through the barrier, with the exception of his senpouhoko wielding hand. The sudden halt nearly yanked his arm out of its socket. It was painful enough to cancel out the jutsu and dull his reflexes a second too late as Sojan struck him in the face with the staff and ejected him from the barrier with enough force to send him crashing to the ground. Naruto picked himself up out of the small crater. That was going to hurt in the morning. Futon. He formed a single hand seal and then cocked his arm back as though he were about to throw something. Sojan remained floating in his barrier with watchful look in his eye. More imprudent ninjutsu? Wind began to spiral in Naruto's hand and take form of something long, thin and sharp. Naruto gripped the wind and threw it. Repuyari, one amber eye narrowed as Sojan sensed imminent danger. He reinforced his barrier in the nick of time as the gale javelin shot through the air like a bullet and made contact. The reinforced barrier seemed to be holding as the force subsided just as fast as it had struck. Sojan sneered condescendingly for a moment, until he noticed his young opponent's satisfied grin, and a moment later, felt wetness on his cheek. Sojan touched his cheek with his free hand and found blood on his fingertips. He concentrated his previous jutsu into a focused projectile to increase its piercing power. This boy will one day be truly terrifying. I must end him now. Konoha. Tsunade pored over the draft on her desk. Satisfied, she leant back and read it over again, and one more time after that, nodding to herself as she read and reread the letter. To those who call themselves allied to Sojan of Kusa, you have mistaken us for weak and now your great allies are the first to pay the price. As you read this, Kusa no Kuni reaps the consequences of their transgressions against Hai no Kuni as they deal with the aftermath of a direct and sanctioned assault upon their soil during which Kusagakure sustained considerable damage. Kusa cannot threaten us, and neither can you. Take this as a sign of things to come if you continue to conspire with enemies of Hai no Kuni. We do not seek war when peace is beneficial for us all. We will not, however, hesitate to visit the same harm upon you as we have upon Kusa no Kuni should you continue to actively oppose us. We will strike down all those who threaten us with extreme prejudice. Reconsider this foolish alliance you have struck and think of those you are charged to protect. Fight us and we will break you. Seek peace and we shall gladly work with you to achieve it. Regards, Senju Tsunade, Godame Hokage of Konoha no Sado. This should do, the Godame said as she handed the letter to Shizen. What do you think? The assistant read the letter, and then read it again. A tad aggressive, but given the circumstances. This will do. Have copies made and send them to all no villages allied with Kusa, Tsunade instructed. Shizen nodded, attaching the letter to her clipboard. Right away, Tsunade-sama. As the brunette left, the blonde turned to the rosette in the room. That teammate of yours might actually have done us a favor in the long run. What did the letter say, Tsunade-sama? Sakura asked of her master. Things had been moving very fast in the last 30 minutes. She had a hard time following any of it. If you don't mind my asking, she remembered her manners. Good old-fashioned schoolyard bullying, Sakura, Tsunade said, grinning mischievously. They came for our lunch money, but we brought a stick. Sakura smiled dryly, not quite getting understanding. I'm not sure I understand, Tsunade-sama. Let me put it this way, if Kusa and their allies are the bullies, Naruto is the stick. Sakura finished catching on. The Godame nodded. Let's hope he's a big enough stick to crack some skulls. It might save lives in the long run. A lot of lives. The door opened and Shizen returned, though she wasn't alone. The advisors Hamura and Koharu accompanied here with matching looks of disdain. What's going on? Tsunade asked, looking at her assistant directly. That's our line, Tsunade, Koharu cut in, holding the drafted letter in her wrinkly hand. What is the meaning of this? Tsunade's voice took an icy tone. You harass my assistant and intercept my correspondence, and you dare to demand what the meaning is? The slug Sannin slowly rose out of her chair. Return it, she commanded with an outstretched hand. She had had just about enough of these two old crows meddling with her affairs. Now, you're about to declare war to numerous nations at once, Hamura protested with added derision. What kind of Hokage would act so foolishly? You have exactly 5 seconds before I take your actions as treason, Tsunade warned, stepping from behind her desk. You two have been regretting your decision to sponsor me for the seat since I got here, and you've been trying to sabotage me ever since. That is simply untrue. Koharu denied. I'm not finished, Tsunade said coldly. Out of respect for Hiruzen-sensei I put up with you, but now my patience has run out, so heed my words carefully. She squared off directly with the advisors. If you make me count to 5 I will have the two of you executed this very afternoon. Preposterous! Hamura objected. You are. Tsunade tilted her head as though daring him to finish that thought. 1. You think you can threaten us? Koharu challenged. 2. We will not be coerced into submission, Hamura added. Tsunade continued to count without hesitation. 3. The advisors looked at one another perturbed. 4. Hamura decided to swallow his pride and took the paper from Koharu and surrendered it to Tsunade's outstretched hand. This is not over. No, Tsunade handed the letter back to the Shizen. No, it's not. She sat back down behind her desk. Tread carefully. My patience with the both of you is officially up. Shizen closed the door behind her as she left. A considerable tension remained between the Hokage and the advisors. Sakura felt more than a little out of place in the room after what had just transpired. Her respect for her master had skyrocketed from admiration and adoration to sheer reverence. But at the same time, she had seen the elders blink first. She had witnessed an embarrassment that would surely come back to bite her if she divulged any of this to anyone. Sakura just wished something would happen to dispel the tension. The silent animosity was palpable. As if to grant her wish, Fukasaku reappeared with another puff of smoke carrying a sizable crystal ball. We have footage! The toad declared, putting the crystal ball down on the desk. Agama-sama has allowed us to view the battle with him. Sakura hid her sigh of relief as her master and the advisor turned their attention to the toad. Fukasaku meddled with the crystal ball for a moment as he set it up. It took longer than expected from the looks of it, as the toad grew agitated enough to bang the sphere a few times. Images began to flicker in the crystal. The images were hazy at first and improved only marginally, but it was better than nothing. There, the toad hopped out of the way as they all peered into the crystal ball. The image is not as crisp as I would like, but Mount Myaboku is many leagues from here. What they saw was shocking to all of them. Naruto was in the midst of heated combat with an old man in a protective sphere. He was flying and hurling ninjutsu as they clashed. The surrounding buildings were either in ruins or bathing in flames. Giant falcons and toads wreaked havoc in the background. It was an image of pure chaos. We can't hear them. Tsunade bit her thumbnail, frowning. He seems to be holding his ground. Sakura's eyes widened when she got a good look at Naruto. He had changed rather significantly. He was much taller than she remembered him, and his hair had grown longer. She had to squint her eyes, but she could tell his face had matured also. He looked much different from the boy she knew when they were growing up. Is that really Naruto? She had to ask. I don't know, Sakura, Tsunade said dryly, turning to her pupil. Do you happen to know any other loud blonde idiots picking fights with village leaders that haven't been cited in public for years? Kyuzugakyur. Something had changed. Whether it was the fact the village leader was tired of him, or because he had made him bleed, Naruto couldn't tell, but whatever it was, it set Sojan off. The one-eyed shinobi twirled his staff, threw it in the air and quickly went through a string of hand seals before catching it again and tapping it against the paved ground. A strong gust of wind blew past. At first nothing happened. Naruto considered whether the older shinobi had activated another seal perhaps. He tensed, readying himself. Then he saw something in the corner of his eye. The carefully manicured patches of grass all over the military district rapidly shot up and began to congregate high above in the sky. Countless blades of grass gathered to give form to a grass dragon. Kusa Ninpo Oji, Kamasori Kasaryu. Sojan breathed heavily. The razor grass dragon, Kusa's most powerful jutsu, had been passed down for many generations in the shinobi village. It was immensely powerful and deadly, and very taxing on chakra. It had been years since he had last used it. Naruto could hardly believe his eyes as the razor grass dragon continued to grow in size. Grass continued to shoot up like pin needles faster than he would have been able to stop even if he tried. Before long the grass dragon dwarfed even the likes of Gamabunta in size, its serpentine body coiling for seemingly eternity. Yellow orbs of chakra glowed ominously in its eye sockets, and the dragon released a screeching roar that threatened to split his eardrums. Finally regaining his composure, Naruto adopted a throwing stance and threw a gale javelin at the grass dragon. Futon, Repuyari! Sojan made no attempt to stop him and simply observed his reaction as the gale javelin barely did any damage to the still-growing construct. It is futile, boy. This jutsu has been passed down for generations in Kyuzugakyur. It is our single most coveted kinjutsu. Naruto looked away from the serpentine monster to look at the Kusa leader. Orochimaru's summon is a lot cooler. The mere mention of the name seemed to sour the shogun's mood and prompt the village leader to raise his staff and command his creation to attack. The grass dragon screeched again, louder this time, as it collected its enormous body, and swatted aside one of the falcons. The summon hurtled to the ground and crashed into a residential building in the civilian districts with a resounding blast. Naruto lurched involuntarily. He felt a cold sensation in his stomach. His chakra suddenly felt different. He couldn't put a finger on it, but it felt as though it had changed. It felt wrong. It felt as though something had been taken from him. It was a nauseating sensation, thoroughly uncomfortable and ill-boding. Then he heard the remaining falcons release angry caws and the realization hit him. Naruto took off, blasting wind chakra through his propulsion palms as he rocketed towards the grass dragon to intercept the remaining falcons. "No!" he shouted to warn them. He sped up even more and soared like a missile. The strain on his wrists was excruciating, but he couldn't let it get in the way. The remaining cast of falcons set upon the grass dragon. Hayatsum the Falcon Lord and Senzaro hung back as the remaining 4 falcons attacked. They didn't stand a chance, though it appeared as though they did at first as they tore chunks of the grass dragon's body with their talons. The falcons achieved little more than injure themselves as the razor grass dragon lived up to its name in more than shape. It drew blood through the lightest of touches, and what damage the falcons did inflict was repaired quickly as more grass grew to replace the chunks. "Get back!" Naruto met Hayatsum and Senzaro before they could join the fray. "Stay back. It'll simply repair itself. The construct killed one of my caste. It must die." Hayatsum outraged. "It can't die until Sojan is dead," Naruto shouted over the screeching and cawing. "I'll take care of it. I need you to keep assisting the toads." "Father, he is right," Senzaru spoke up tentatively. "The creature killed one of our own with a flick of its tail. We should let Naruto-sama take care of it." "See it done," Hayatsum said before recalling his remaining falcons. "We want it, and its creator destroyed." Naruto nodded, looking from the grass dragon to Sojan down below. "It's what I came here for." The falcons didn't hear him as they returned to assisting the toads. The grass dragon released another screech and came his way at greater speed than its size would have suggested, though taking into consideration the creature was made entirely out of grass it was to be considered. Still, Naruto was confident he wouldn't lose in a battle of speed. "Come at me, you ugly son of a bitch." He took the pieces of metal off his wrists and attached them to his ankles. He then spread his arms and conjured 2 whirlwind lances to cover both of his arms. The dragon screeched, its yellow orbs intensifying as they locked on him. Naruto set off at even greater speed than before. Usually he preferred to use his propulsion palm technique. It simply made more sense given how he could still run if need be if he hurt his hands. Aerial combat was a different story, however. He would need all the speed he could get, and his lances could act as emergency thrusters if necessary. Naruto focused his chakra through his legs to the sole his feet. Fujin no Hisho, Wind God's flight, made a world's difference. The strain was no less on his ankles than it was on his wrists, but the additional speed was worth it. As he soared to meet the grass dragon, he spun like torpedo with his lances extended, tearing through its razor grass body. Flashes of white and green cut through the air as he flew through the gaping hole in the dragon's gigantic body. He hissed in pain, bleeding from several cuts on his arms, legs and even his face. Even the slightest contact was enough to break skin. Fuck, that hurt. Fortunately his healing factor kicked in almost immediately, and the shallow cuts began to close up. The grass dragon released another ear-splitting screech. The giant hole in its body was already beginning to repair itself. As if it wasn't bad enough already, the monstrosity grew a pair of arms as it repaired itself. 4. Naruto had a long enough lead on it to consider his options first. If he dealt with the dragon and took too long, Sojan would have him at a disadvantage, but if he decided to go for Sojan directly, that would leave his falcons unprotected. The logical thing to do would be to dismiss them. It would put the toads at a disadvantage, but they were tough, and it would save him considerable amounts of chakra he would otherwise be using to maintain them. Following this train of thought, the worst thing that could come out of this would be offending the falcons for dismissing them without warning, but he'd rather ruffle their feathers than see them dead. The decision was made. Naruto cut his chakra off from the remaining falcons by the time the grass dragon released another screech and came surging his way. He immediately noticed something was wrong. He could feel it as soon as he tried to dismiss the falcons, an awful, chilling sensation similar to when one of the falcons died. The caste of peregrine falcons was still present, and just as confused as he was, judging from the way they instinctively regrouped to protect their falcon lord. Uzumaki Ryufuin, Yakukaso Shujin. Naruto froze momentarily as he looked over his shoulder with widened eyes and found Sojan hovering in his protective dome, staff leveled at him with a menacing sneer. An unpleasant chill coursed through his body, followed by a burning sensation as black markings began to appear on his forehead, flowing from a spiral-shaped mark on his forehead where he had been struck earlier. This is the jutsu he used to keep Jiraiya from reverse summoning, Naruto realized. He swung his right arm intending to take the shogun's head with his whirlwind lance, but came to a sudden stop as more markings began to flow from the spiral-shaped mark on his forehead. Sojan raised his extended index and middle finger at him. Uzumaki Ryufuin, carrying no fusa. Uzumaki style? His eyes set in a wide stare of disbelief as his body froze completely and remained suspended in the air. His curiosity regarding the origin of the seal that now bound him quickly faded, replaced by panic and fear that took their toll on his nerves. Darkness clouded Sojan's one visible eye as his killing intent spiked. My pet is hungry. Naruto could only grit his teeth as he struggled to regain control of his body. The temporal lockdown certainly lived up to its name as he continued to fight its hold over him. He could only hope the temporary period of time would be short. Sojan hovered away and raised his staff once more, directing the grass dragon to attack. Shit! No matter how hard he tried, his body simply wouldn't follow his mind. The more he seemed to struggle, the faster the black markings continued to spread over his entire body. The dragon released a roar as it neared and unhinged its jaws as it swallowed its prey whole. Konoha! No! Tsunade exclaimed as she watched the grass dragon swallow Naruto whole. The office was crowded with high-ranking shinobi of various departments. INBU, the torture and interrogation force, strategy and logistics, and the military police amongst others. A tense silence fell over all of them as they observed the crystal ball with apprehension. Sakura covered her mouth in silent horror. This is not good, Hamura stated gravely, with a sympathetic look in his eyes as he looked at the Godame. We may have to reevaluate our options. We cannot afford to be dragged into a war like this, Koharu concurred, though with more reservation than usual. Tsunade regarded the two of them with look of fury. They may be right, Tsunade-sama. Naro Shikaku spoke up with a wary look on his scarred face. I don't like this any more than you do, but the situation isn't looking good. I concur with Shikaku-dano, Hayashi agreed with a nod to the Nara clan head. The Hyuga looked at Tsunade sternly. At the very least we must reconsider. Not so fast, young uns, Fukasaku interjected, his old eyes glued on the crystal. It's not over yet, Kyuzugakure. Sojan watched the beast devour the Jinchuriki whole, certain of his victory, though ever so cautious. Though none had ever been swallowed by the Kamasori Kasari and lived to tell, his opponent was a Jinchuriki, one that was rather powerful on his own and who had yet to even use his Biju's power. A long moment went by. The battle seemed to be over. Uzumaki's chakra had disappeared. Sojan released a relieved sigh. He didn't know how much longer he could have maintained his jutsu. The Kamasori Kasari was taxing on his reserves and stamina to say the least, even in his youth. Suddenly the dragon released a cry. It was afraid. This unsettled the shogun, for its conscience was a reflection of his own. What was there to be afraid of? Crimson chakra erupted from the dragon's midsection, ripping it apart as it erupted like a volcano. The churka swirled like a hurricane of chakra, a maelstrom of carnage. Naruto breathed heavily as crimson chakra flowed from his body. Steam flowed from the countless cuts that covered every visible inch of his body as his healing factor kicked in. I was hoping to avoid using the bastard fox. Though alarmed, the shogun remained still. An insane pressure kept him where he was. He sensed greater danger than he could repel if he attacked now. Konoha's Jinchuriki was no longer fighting with his own power. The sheer pressure of his presence alone was evidence of that fact. The crimson maelstrom held Naruto suspended in the air. His already lengthy hair had grown even longer and spikier, now reaching his shoulder blades. The whiskers marks on his cheeks grew deeper and more defined, his nails grew longer and fangs protruded from under his lips. Red, slit eyes fixed on his opponent with cold, murderous intent. I really didn't want to use this power. Oh? Sojan's eye narrowed. The next thing he knew, a crimson chakra lance collided with his barrier. The dome quickly began to crack under the pressure. It would hold for much longer despite his best efforts to reinforce it. Then there was blood.